Chapter 1099, 5 Great Prodigies. Not only was the second tier losing members, but the third tier was also losing members. Once again, Ling Han was the only person left. Everyone found this quite amusing. Was this person an omen of bad luck? Were the tiers that he joined all going to crumble? No. It was because he was too powerful, while the others were unable to hang on. The 100 or so prodigies rapidly decreased to less than 50 people, all struggling ahead. The 4 prodigies in the first tier retrieved their weapons at almost exactly the same time. It was clear that they didn't dare to be careless and fight the stone statues with their bare hands. Otherwise, it was possible that they would be kicked out of the formation. It would be extremely embarrassing if that occurred. They were hailed as prodigies, yet at the same time, they couldn't accept any failures. Otherwise, the halo around their heads would disappear. It hurts. Ling Han exclaimed in his mind. In the beginning, he could only just feel the strikes. Afterward, he could feel a little bit of pain. Right now, however, he felt true pain. Being struck by the fists of the stone statues was like a child being heavily smacked in the bottom by an adult. It hurt that much. Thankfully, hurting and actually being injured were two completely different matters. He was still fearless right now. However, this was only the 4th stage. When Ling Han reached the 5th stage, it was extremely likely that he would feel genuine pressure. At that time, the attacks of the stone statues would truly be a threat to him. They would be able to injure him, at the very least. This is incredible. The power of the stone statues is only at the early stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. It's probably the might of the regulations. However, the power of regulations unleashed by these stone statues had already exceeded the level of the mountain river tier. It was because of this that they possessed such a lethal might. The 50 or so people slowed down once again, with only Ling Han's speed remaining unchanged. His advance was especially steady, and the 3rd tier that had him as its sole member started to catch up to the 2nd tier. After a short while, he became a member of the 2nd tier. At this moment, there were only 2 tiers left. 5th stage. Just as everyone expected, a 4th divine pattern appeared on the fists of the stone statue. Blood sprayed through the air, and a dozen or so people were immediately knocked out from the 2nd tier. Fortunately, the people who were able to make it to this stage were all prodigies among prodigies. They all had techniques to protect their lives, and thus not a single one of them died, even though they suffered extremely severe wounds. Meanwhile, Ling Han finally felt pressure. When he was struck by the stone statue's fists, even his physique was unable to remain unscathed. Instead, blood started to seep from his skin. It hurt like hell. Ling Han stopped fighting against them head-on. Instead, he increased the power of his attacks as he used his movement techniques and unleashed his annihilating dragon star arrow to obliterate the stone statues in the distance. As for the stone statues closer to him, he cut them down using his fast technique. Only the offensive power of these stone statues had increased, after all, and their defenses hadn't changed a single bit. After increasing the power of his attacks, he finally raised his speed for the first time. He overtook the 2nd tier and started to close in on the 1st tier. The spear-wielding man and the others had naturally left the stone statue formation already, and they couldn't help but grimace as they watched Ling Han's progress. It was as if they had seen a ghost. This person is far too freakish. Even Wuque paled in comparison. There was truly no shortage of prodigies in the world. There was always a higher mountain behind a peak. Wuque and the 3 others all glanced back when they sensed a 5th person coming up from behind them. When they saw who it was, their eyes almost popped out of their heads. After reaching their level, they were genuinely supercilious. This wasn't because they were arrogant, but because they were confident in their invincibility. So what if they were up against hundreds or thousands of people? They believed they were invincible, and they could crush anyone who stood in their way. Thus, they had treated only the 3 other people in the first tier as their opponents. They had never paid attention to anyone in the second tier or lower. Were they worthy? Right now, however, someone had advanced from the second tier, and was gradually catching up to them. This wasn't the most important part. The most important part was that this person was actually only at the high extreme of the mountain river tier. How could they stand being caught up to? Wuque was the most affected by this, and his face almost became green. He hadn't taken Ling Han to heart before, yet Ling Han was actually reeling him in now. Wasn't Ling Han slapping him across the face? As prodigious as he was, it had only ever been him who had slapped others across the face. Since when had he been slapped in the face by others? He gritted his teeth and forcefully raised his speed. This significantly increased the burden on him. If this were the 10th stage, he would be able to give one last push and charge toward the finish line. However, this was only the 5th stage, so he would definitely run out of energy by making a push here. It was hard to say whether he would be able to make it to the end of the stone statue formation. However, he couldn't tolerate letting Ling Han catch up to him, especially since Shui Yanyu was watching from the sides. His dignity and pride wouldn't allow it. His battle prowess was truly powerful, and golden light exuded from his body. His arms turned faint golden in color, and it was as if they were forged from godly metal. He was unscathed even though he faced the attacks of the stone statues head-on. He naturally couldn't maintain this state for a long time, and thus he unleashed his full speed as he charged forward. He had to make the most of his invincibility state to increase the distance between him and Ling Han. That way, even when he came out of this state later, he would still have enough time to recover. Dumb C***NT. Ling Han said in his mind. Wuque was treating him as a powerful rival, yet he didn't take him to heart at all. How could he view someone as his rival if they didn't form 5 mountains and rivers and didn't become a 10-star genius? Although Ling Han hadn't taken that step yet, he was fully confident that it was only a matter of time. He came to a realization that this stone statue formation was most likely prepared for 10-star geniuses. After reaching the consummate level of the mountain river tier, one would be able to advance a stage with each extra star of power that they possessed. If one were a 10-star genius, they would be able to reach the 10th stage. Thus, it was very likely that no one present could pass this formation apart from him. Of course, he wasn't a 10-star genius yet. In fact, he was still a long way from reaching the consummate level of the mountain river tier. However, didn't he have a powerful physique and a freakish recovery ability? These gave him the chance to pass the formation. What he was more curious about was, would there be a reward for successfully passing this stone statue formation? 6th stage. The attacks from the stone statues became increasingly vicious. Power was only a part of battle prowess. This statement held very true here. However, this was only under extremely special circumstances. This was as cultivators couldn't wield regulations as the stone statues could. If one were at the mountain river tier, how would they be able to comprehend the regulations of the sun-moon tier? This wasn't a matter of time, but rather something decided by one's cultivation level. After reaching this stage, there was no need to separate them according to tiers anymore. That was because there were only the 5 of them left: Ling Han, Wuque, Xiao Sisi, Su Jing, and Duan. Who would be the first prodigy to be kicked out? Who would persist until the very end? Who would be the super genius able to barge through? The spectators were all gripped with curiosity. They could clearly leave first, yet none of them was willing to do so. They all waited outside the formation, determined to watch on until the last moment. The 6th stage put them under extreme pressure. Even Ling Han was slightly afraid of the stone statue's attacks. If he were struck by a full power punch, then even he would bleed. It was already so for him, so the other 4 prodigies were naturally under even more pressure. However, the four of them had an advantage in cultivation level, with their power and battle prowess both being far above Ling Han's. Thus, although their defenses were weaker than Ling Han's, they were still able to make up for this shortcoming by being more powerful. They gave the stone statues absolutely no chance to strike them. The five of them were drenched in sweat. They weren't merely being tested on their strength right now, but also on their willpower. Chapter 1100, First. Few people could persist under such immense pressure. Wuque and the three others lived up to their status as young prodigies. Although they hadn't formed their fifth mountain and river, nor reached the height of a 10-star genius, they could completely be viewed as king-tier cultivators who possessed the demeanor and confidence of rulers. They gritted their teeth as they continued to advance. Not a single one of them gave up. 7th stage. The speed of Wuque and the three others fell drastically. In fact, they almost ground to a halt. The stone statue formation wasn't as exaggerated as Ling Han had thought it was. The first stage genuinely did correspond to the early stage of the consummate level. Then, the battle prowess of each following stage would increase by 1 star. Thus, the battle prowess of the stone statues in the 7th stage was equivalent to 3 stars above the peak stage of the consummate level. If any one of the stone statues were singled out, Wuque and the others would all be able to defeat it easily. In fact, they wouldn't be afraid even if they had to battle against several dozen of them. The problem was, the number of stone statues here far exceeded a few dozen. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. They were endless, and when their numbers reached a certain threshold, their overwhelming quantity would lead to a qualitative change. Generally speaking, a difference of 1 star could be mitigated if the weaker side had 10 times the number of people. Thus, 1,000 stone statues would be enough to bury either of Wuque or the three others, even if they were 6-star geniuses. It was already extremely difficult for them to advance. Moreover, what made them despair was the fact that this was only the 7th stage. Even if they could pass it, there were still 3 even more difficult stages ahead. If the stone statues became stronger according to the same pattern, those at the 10th stage would possess a battle prowess of 6 stars above the peak stage of the consummate level. Just one of them would be enough to match it against Wuque or the others, let alone hundreds upon thousands of them. Passing the 10th stage seemed like an impossible task. Ling Han nodded in his mind. His previous estimation had been wrong, but this formation could indeed only be passed by 10-star geniuses. Could his freakish defenses and recovery ability help him pass this formation? Ling Han wasn't sure. After all, his cultivation level was still too low. If his physique could advance another level, to that of level 5 godly metal, then that would be truly impressive. If he reached that level, he would be able to casually stroll through this place. However, his achievement right now was already enough to scare everyone to death. He was a whopping 6 sub-minor levels weaker, yet he was somehow able to advance alongside Wuque and the other super geniuses. Didn't this mean that Ling Han would be able to easily suppress Wuque and the others as long as he reached the same cultivation level as them? What an astonishing physique! Wuque and the others exclaimed in their minds. Against such defenses, would their battle prowess of 5 or 6 stars really be effective? Ling Han's situation was much better than that of Wuque and the others. Although the stone statues possessed a terrifying destructive ability, their power still remained at the early stage of the consummate level, which was much weaker than him. He charged forward at full speed, prioritizing defense over offense. He would take the stone statues' attacks head-on if he genuinely wasn't able to dodge them. Although his body was riddled with wounds, he had activated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, which healed his wounds in almost an instant. After taking another few steps, Ling Han overtook Duan, who had been in 4th place. There was a look of displeasure on Duan's face as he was overtaken by Ling Han. However, after a moment's thought, he forcefully suppressed his urge to use his trump card. He also had a trump card similar to Xiaofan's, and it granted him a burst of explosive power. However, he understood that unless he had a battle prowess of 10 stars, it would be impossible for him to pass this stone statue formation. That being the case, why should he reveal his trump card before so many pairs of watchful eyes? It wasn't worth it. He immediately walked out the side, giving up on continuing through the formation. The spectators all sighed and exclaimed. At this point, Ling Han had already defeated a supreme prodigy. By the looks of it, he was clearly going to defeat more. After another while, Ling Han overtook Su Jing, replacing him as third. However, this third place quickly became last place again as Su Jing also chose to give up. Impressive, unbelievably impressive. Everyone watched on in anticipation. Could Ling Han become first? Or perhaps even pass through the stone statue formation? It would have been an absolute joke if they had thought this in the beginning. Now, however, it had become a very real possibility. Who would have imagined that someone at the high extreme could be this strong? Ling Han caught up to Xiao Sisi. This woman gazed at Ling Han with a smile as she battled, and she said, "I'm Xiao Sisi. This brother is?" She was a beauty, and her smile was especially enchanting and radiant. It would make one's heart thump with excitement. Ling Han remained calm, and said, "I'm Ling Han. Brother Ling, do you mind if we catch up later?" Xiao Sisi said with a smile. Ling Han nodded, and said, "No problem." He strode past Xiao Sisi, who exited the stone statue formation like the other two. Right now, there were only 2 people remaining. In fact, Xiaofan also wanted to give up. This was a battle with no hope or purpose. Thus, giving up earlier or later wouldn't make any difference at all. However, it was Ling Han who was catching up to him, and he definitely couldn't give up before Ling Han. His pride kept him going, and it gave him the strength to grit his teeth and continue battling against the stone statues. He continued to fight this lost battle. 8th stage. The stone statues became even more powerful, with 7 divine patterns glowing on their fists. Their destructive ability was astonishing, and although it was impossible for all of them to attack in unison, it was entirely possible for tens or hundreds of them to attack together. Each of their attacks was terrifying, and there was absolutely no space for them to dodge. They could only face the stone statue's attacks head-on. Wah! Xiaofan instantly vomited blood after facing just one attack. So what if he was a prodigy? The stone statues all possessed a battle prowess that was no weaker than his. Moreover, dozens of them had attacked together, causing him to almost crumble under their strikes. At this moment, he saw Ling Han overtake him. Pooh! He spat another mouthful of blood. This time, he had been angered to the point of spitting blood. The trash in his eyes had overtaken him. How could he accept this? Humph! There was killing intent in his eyes, and he was just about to attack Ling Han. However, there were so many stone statues here, so how could he find an opportunity to strike? Darkness instantly enveloped him as countless stone statues rushed over to attack him. He obviously couldn't counterattack, and the only thing he could do was defend while charging toward the side. Ling Han glanced back for a second. Although Xiaofan hadn't managed to attack him, Ling Han had sensed his killing intent. Ling Han couldn't help but look down on him. Such a petty prodigy. His success will definitely be limited. He immediately retracted his gaze and placed his full focus on the battle before him. He had already this stage, so he didn't want to give up. Ling Han activated his divine patterns of gravity to disrupt the stone statues, reducing the number of attacks that he had to face as much as possible. Then, he sprinted forward at full speed. This was extremely effective. After all, these stone statues possessed a powerful offensive ability, but merely possessed power at the early stage of the consummate level. This was their biggest weak point, and Ling Han had managed to grab onto it and ferociously exploit it. Oi, oi, oi. If this continues, it's genuinely possible that he'll be able to pass the stone statue formation. There are only 2 stages left. Everyone was stunned. Even super geniuses like Wuque had been unable to manage this great feat yet. A cultivator at the high extreme was closing in on success. This sight was truly hard to believe. However, Ling Han's speed became quicker and quicker. He had an advantage in power, and thus the stone statues were unable to stop him. They were merely able to riddle his body with wounds and send his blood flying through the air. However, Ling Han's footsteps didn't even stop for a second. He was like an arrow, and his speed only continued to increase. Chapter 1101, Surpassing the Legends. Everyone clutched their heads and exclaimed in surprise. This was far too astonishing. Wasn't Wuque struggling to take another step forward? Yet, Ling Han was actually increasing his speed at this moment. Humph! Wuque clenched his fists as killing intent exuding from his body. This person is indeed impressive. He's worth befriending, Su Jing said calmly. He could naturally sense the killing intent that Wuque had toward Ling Han. However, he didn't care. He believed that he was peerless, and his background was also top-notch. Thus, what did he need to be afraid of? Xiaofan was extremely beautiful, and she said smilingly, I've long heard of Brother Su's name. It's my honor to meet you today. Although Su Jing had strong willpower, his heart still fluttered when he saw Xiaofan's breathtaking beauty. He hurriedly clasped his hands in respect, and said, I've also long heard of Lady Cici's name. It's a shame that I was never able to meet you before. If all goes according to plan, we'll meet again at the majestic Heaven Sect, where we'll become fellow students, Duan said. His gaze swept across Ling Han, and he lightly flicked his fingers, saying, at that time, who knows what level this person will have reached? Su Jing and Xiaofan both nodded, an expectant look on their faces. In terms of battle prowess alone, they definitely had a crushing advantage over Ling Han. However, this was because Ling Han's cultivation level was far below theirs. Once he reached the same level as them, it was likely that their battle prowess would be hard to differentiate. Even if theirs was still stronger, they would still have no way to deal with Ling Han's physique and recovery ability. Su Jing shook his head after mulling over this for a moment, and said, other than defeating him in one blow, there's truly no other method. Otherwise, one will be exhausted to death by him. He felt that there was no way to deal with Ling Han's defenses. He's merely a lowly commoner from a small world, there's no need to hold him in such high regard. Wuque said. His face was still filled with disdain. Ha! Xiaofan and the 2 others merely gave an indifferent chuckle, not bothering to reply. Wuque already hated Ling Han with passion. With this preconception, how could he assess things fairly? As such, there was no need to listen to him. Meanwhile, Ling Han was flying through the formation. The destructive ability of the stone statues had already reached 4 stars above the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Ling Han would definitely be wounded whenever he was struck by their attacks, and these wounds were quite heavy as well. Thus, he didn't dare to slow down, and did his best to minimize the amount of damage that he suffered. Even so, he was still struck frequently, causing his body to become riddled with wounds. If it were someone else, they would have definitely died after suffering so many strikes. However, Ling Han was barely affected. The stone statues could continue to attack him, and he would continue to charge through the formation. Everyone was speechless upon seeing this. How could such a freakish person exist? Are you really a human? Are you sure you're not a puppet forged from godly metal? 9th stage. This stage was even more terrifying as the destructive ability of the stone statues had risen by another star. A bloody hole would appear in Ling Han's body every time he was struck by their fists. In fact, even his godly bones were groaning. The expressions of Wuque and the three others changed drastically. Their battle prowess was still above these stone statues, yet they would definitely be wounded if they were to be hit by their attacks. Apart from freaks like Ling Han, the large majority of people had far stronger offensive abilities than defensive abilities. Didn't the saying go, offense was the strongest defense? With our strength, we'll still be able to suppress the stone statues of this stage. As for the next stage, they didn't continue this sentence. At the next stage, every single stone statue would have a destructive ability that was on par with theirs, so what would it be like if hundreds upon thousands of these stone statues attacked them together? If it were a one-on-one battle, they believed that they would still win. In fact, they would be confident even if it were a 1-on-10 battle. After all, these stone statues were only puppets. Each was like a child wielding a supreme god tool. The threat it posed was indeed great, yet one could still achieve a steady victory as long as they dealt with the matter carefully. However, once the number of stone statues increased to what they saw in the stone statue formation, there was simply no way to achieve victory. Although we're 6-star geniuses, we can only admit defeat when faced with the last stage. Don't tell me one genuinely has to raise their physique and recovery ability to such an incredible level in order to pass. Xiaofan pondered for a moment before saying, "Have you guys heard about the existence of 8 or even 9-star geniuses in the distant galaxies?" Su Jing nodded, and said, "I've indeed heard of these rumors. However, so what? I've already raised each of my cultivation levels to perfection, yet my power is still only 6 stars. Taking into account some secret techniques, I can wield a battle prowess of 7 stars. However, 8 stars? That's hard to imagine. Don't forget that 5-star geniuses are already considered to be legends in our galaxy." A meaningful smile appeared on Xiaofan's face, and she said, "Since we've already surpassed the legends, this proves that the legends are completely realizable. Thus, it won't be surprising if 8 or 9-star geniuses genuinely exist." This. Su Jing and Duan were both stunned. They were already supreme prodigies who stood at the summit of the younger generation. However, they were unable to imagine how they could take another step forward. Duan's heart shuddered, and he said, "Could that legend also be?" Su Jing involuntarily exclaimed in surprise, and asked, "You've also heard of that legend?" Wuque finally joined in on their conversation begrudgingly, saying, "Humph. Are you talking about the 5th mountain and river? What a joke. The mountain river tier only has 4 minor tiers, and this is the unbreakable law of cultivation. How can one possibly form a 5th mountain and river?" Xiaofan agreed with his viewpoint, and said, "Indeed. We should be the most powerful prodigies in the world. Moreover, we opened the sky from a small world, and we've also raised each cultivation level to perfection. However, I've found that my 4 mountains and rivers have formed an extremely stable state. It's absolutely impossible to form a new mountain and river." Su Jing and Duan both nodded in agreement. They had naturally attempted to form a new mountain and river and become a legendary prodigy after hearing of the rumors. However, they saw no hope for success. Most importantly, this was only a rumor, so they had been extremely unsure themselves. Perhaps it was an impossible task to begin with. This caused their willpower to waver. Should they really put all of their efforts into this? If this were genuinely just a rumor, they would suffer far too great of a loss. However, I believe that it's possible to form 5 mountains and rivers now. Xiaofan's eyes glimmered with intelligence, and she said, "Otherwise, this stone statue formation is absolutely impossible to pass." Su Jing nodded in agreement, and said, "That's right. If one forms another mountain and river, they'll be able to possess a battle prowess on par with pseudo-Sun Moon tier elites even though they haven't actually reached the Sun Moon tier yet. In that case, there's definitely hope of passing this formation." Great minds think alike. I'm definitely going to form 5 mountains and rivers. If I don't succeed, I won't break through to the Sun-Moon tier. Duan, who was brimming with confidence, continued, I'll either be a prodigy at the summit of cultivators, or I'll die trying. Agreed. Xiao Sisi and Su Jing both nodded seriously. It was a rare delight to find others with similar aspirations on the path to the summit of cultivation. They weren't lonely. Wuque wore a look of indifference. However, thoughts swirled through his mind. He had to admit that forming 5 mountains and rivers was the best method to pass this formation. Ling Han was probably using some other, crooked method. Who else possessed such a freakish physique and recovery ability? He watched on in jealousy as Ling Han sped through the 9th stage and headed into the final stage. Chapter 1102, Reward. 10th stage. If there were no hidden surprises, the destructive ability of the stone statues would reach the same level as Wuque and the others. This was almost impossible to defeat. One had to realize that no one in this galaxy had formed 5 mountains and rivers. Thus, a power of 6 stars was already the strongest. Anyhow, how many prodigies could reach a power of 6 stars? In order to reach this level, they had to open the sky from a small world. Even if there were more of these prodigies in addition to Wuque and the 3 others, they most likely numbered in the single digits. There wouldn't be too many of them. Now, however, tens of thousands of stone statues that possessed a destructive ability on this level were ruthlessly attacking Ling Han. Wuque and the 3 other prodigies involuntarily sucked in cold breath. If it were them, they would only be able to last for a few seconds under such relentless and ruthless attacks. If they didn't use their trump cards, it was even possible that they would be unable to flee from the formation. Meanwhile, Ling Han was finally being challenged. Not only would blood spurt from his body when he was punched by the stone statues, but his flesh would also crack open. In fact, even his godly bones became covered in a web of cracks. They didn't break, but if he were punched a few more times, they definitely wouldn't be able to remain intact. How many stone statues were in this formation? Pung, 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 pung. Divine patterns dazzled, and fists flew about. Pa, pa, pa. The sound of bones breaking continuously traveled out from Ling Han's body. The sound was especially clear even though he was engaged in such an intense battle. He definitely can't hold on anymore. Everyone experienced jealousy, especially prodigies who believed that they were number 1 in the world. They naturally wished that no one could surpass themselves. Thus, even Xiao Sisi and the 2 other prodigies who had no conflicts with Ling Han didn't want to see him pass. Their self-confidence would take a huge hit if he could pass while they couldn't. Right now, Ling Han suffered broken bones with each step that he advanced. How could he possibly pass the last stage? He would only end up being smashed into a pulp if he stubbornly continued forward. A cold sneer appeared on Wuque's face. Right now, he truly wished that Ling Han's willpower would be more resolute. If Ling Han continued, it would spare him the trouble of having to deal with him himself. Ling Han's defense was too freakish, and even he wasn't confident that he could kill him. Although this wouldn't sate his resentment enough, who was he? Did he need to bother so much with a lowly commoner? He would be happy as long as Ling Han died. Ling Han continued to shed blood as he advanced. His body had already distorted significantly. The attacks from the stone statues were too concentrated, and even the indestructible Heaven Scroll couldn't heal his wounds in time. The second and third wave of attacks arrived at this time, and these caused his wounds to become even more severe. His godly bones mended, yet they did so in incorrect places. However, this didn't matter, as they would be immediately broken or crushed again. Ling Han barely had time to breathe. There's still half a stage. Ling Han silently took note of his progress in his mind. He had already completed half of the 10th stage, and this filled him with confidence. He used a drop of indestructible true fluid, which instantly healed all of his wounds. He roared loudly and immediately increased his speed. Fuck. The spectators by the two sides were all dumbfounded. Meanwhile, a string of curses raced through their minds. Freak, this person is definitely a freak. You looked like you were just about to fail, yet you suddenly became energetic and filled with vigor again. Are you messing with us on purpose? Ling Han stopped attacking, and unleashed his divine patterns of gravity with all his might. His legs became a blur as he raised his speed to an extreme. 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10. The finish line was in sight. Everyone watched on in suspense. Although Ling Han had suddenly unleashed a burst of explosive power, the attacks of the stone statues weren't becoming any weaker. He was beaten beyond recognition in no time, his broken bones becoming exposed and clear for all to see. Was he still a person? He looked like a pile of mangled flesh. However, this pile of mangled flesh was still charging forward. At the same time, Ling Han's godly bones emitted a dazzling radiance that was filled with an aura of eternity. Last 10 steps. Charge. Ling Han gritted his teeth. Pung, 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 pung. He was ruthlessly attacked, and he felt like he were about to die. Right now, he really wanted to seek refuge in the Black Tower. However, he had already made it so far, so how could he give up? Fortunately, he had crippled himself several times when he had undergone a heavenly tribulation. Thus, he was already a little accustomed to this kind of pain. Otherwise, it was genuinely possible that he would have lost his consciousness due to the pain. He circulated another drop of indestructible true fluid. However, even the effects of the indestructible true fluid would decrease significantly when used in quick succession. It was only enough to help him hang on. 8 steps, 5 steps, 3 steps. Ling Han roared and charged toward the finish line. Wang. His surroundings suddenly became pitch black. Ling Han lay on the floor, and he discovered that the stone statues around him had all disappeared. However, the spectators on the two sides weren't here either. It appeared as if he had entered another space with his final leap. Pung! A stone tablet appeared, seemingly cut from white jade. It was even radiating a gentle glow. There were words on the stone tablet. Ling Han didn't read them, instead choosing to heal his wounds first. He raised his head to look at the stone tablet after recovering some of his battle prowess. When I was young, I charged into the puppet sect alone, destroying all 1 million of their puppets. This feat was ranked first in all of history. This is a duplicate of that formation, and I laid it so that the future generations can remember my greatness. Person of the future, although you passed this formation, you must realize that I've already decreased the battle prowess of the stone statue formation by a significant margin. However, since you were able to pass, you're just strong enough to be worthy of praise. You possess some of my demeanor, so I'll grant you some rewards. Make sure to remember my might and generosity. There weren't many words, and Ling Han was able to read through it quickly. He couldn't help but grimace. The person who'd left this stone tablet was far too narcissistic. I'm only at the high extreme now, so when I reach the consummate level I don't even need to reach the peak stage. Me godly bones will soar to reach a strength of level 5 godly metal. What would it matter even if this stone statue formation were 10 times more powerful? Whatever, there's no point in arguing with someone who's already dead for heaven knows how long. Ling Han shook his head. He raised his gaze above the stone tablet as this was where his reward was. I don't even know the name of that narcissistic person. Ling Han found 4 items above the stone tablet: 3 sheets of paper and a black metallic ball. Vajra seal, lion seal, quick cloud seal, and what the hell is this ball? Fortunately, there were still some words on the back of the stone tablet that described the uses of the 4 items. The Vajra seal acts on the body and can raise one's defenses to the pinnacle of the Sun-Moon tier. Gasp! This is amazing. The Vajra seal can be used between 1 to 10 times, depending on the length of time the seal is activated during each usage. Ling Han picked the Vajra seal up. There were strange symbols drawn on the seal, and it exuded an ancient and heavy aura. Is this for real? Ling Han weighed the seal in his hand, and said, if the description is to be believed, I don't have to be afraid even when I'm facing Sun-Moon tier elites. However, it's extremely likely that I'll be digging my own grave if this old senior is kidding around with me. This was entirely possible. One could tell that the old senior was insanely narcissistic and a little out of touch just by reading the message that he had left on the stone tablet. When activated, the Lion Seal can raise one's power to the pinnacle of the Sun-Moon tier. It can also be used between 1 to 10 times. The Quick Cloud Seal can raise one's speed to the pinnacle of the Sun-Moon tier. It can also be used between 1 to 10 times. Tisk, TSK, TSK. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Ling Han picked the black metallic ball up, and murmured, this is actually a Sun-Moon tier puppet? Unbelievable. He looked at the instructions on the stone tablet, and then tossed the black metallic ball into the air after pressing it a few times. The metallic ball instantly transformed, growing larger and larger. Its shape also changed, and arms and legs started to extend from the ball. It wasn't long before it transformed into a metallic person. Chapter 1103, Going Solo. To confirm whether it's real or fake, we only need to have the Azura Demon Emperor enter and test it out. Ling Han put away the puppet. There were no true origin stones inserted inside, hence, it could only do some simple transformations. It was not equipped with any real power. When he put away the puppet, light suddenly flashed before his eyes. After he had appeared in the stone statue formation, people were running towards him from both sides. It was as if none of them had realized that he had previously vanished for a period of time. Though this period of time was not long, it was still as long as a few breaths' time, yet not one person had realized it. The means of a great elite were truly amazing. Ling Han. Master. Both Shui Yanyu and Ding Ping ran over, the admiration on their faces not the slightest bit concealed. It had really been too difficult. Even such unprecedented prodigies like Wuque could only give up, but Ling Han, who was merely in the high extreme, actually successfully passed the test. With such a comparison, it was clear how incredible such an achievement was. Congratulations, Brother Ling. Xiao Sisi and the others also walked over. In the meanwhile, Wuque humphed coldly. He hesitated slightly, and then strode off with the spear-wielding man and his other subordinates. He wanted to kill Ling Han, but going by the current situation, it seemed to be difficult to do so. Putting aside that freakish defense of Ling Han's, Xiao Sisi and the others would definitely not allow him to do so. Thus, he chose to leave. What the eye didn't see, the heart didn't grieve over. Some people came over to strike up a conversation with Ling Han, but with Xiao Sisi and the others there, their presence was really too strong, intimidating the masses so much that they could barely speak. Soon enough, they left as well. Xiao Sisi and the others were of the mind to befriend Ling Han, and ensured their attitudes were extremely humble. However, this was not a good place for conversation. Thus, the four of them made an agreement to sit down and have a nice chat after entering into the majestic heaven sect. The crowd dispersed. Everyone felt a little disappointed because they had seen with their own eyes that Ling Han had walked out of the stone statue formation, yet had not obtained any reward. Despite going through such difficulty, he had not gained anything. This was naturally a disappointment. When the masses had dispersed, Ling Han tossed out that metal ball, and said, "Little Azura, try entering into this puppet." He had already filled in true origin stones. The Azura Demon Emperor quickly did as he commanded. Bang! This human-shaped puppet immediately stamped a foot down, exuding an incredibly terrifying aura. Master, this is a Sun-Moon tier puppet, he uttered in a trembling voice, almost about to pass out. Previously, when the two pseudo-Sun-Moon tier puppets had been lost, he had almost died of heartache. After possessing immense power, and then losing it, who would be capable of glossing over it? He had never thought that after only about a year's time passed, his master would have gained a true Sun-Moon tier puppet. This was too awesome. Try it out, what level has it reached? Ling Han asked. After the Azura Demon Emperor made a few movements, he replied, in reply to Master, it should be in the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Only in the medium extreme. Ling Han was slightly dissatisfied, but since it had been free, his demand should not be too high, should it? He nodded, and said, this puppet is yours to use. Thank you, Master. This little Azura will work even harder, be cautious and conscientious, meticulous, strive to the utmost. The Azura Demon Emperor was again expressing his position. He had now gained a puppet of Sun-Moon tier, but he did not dare to have the slightest thought of rebellion. His wildness had long since been worn away by Ling Han. In his mind, since Ling Han could give him a Sun-Moon tier puppet to use with a light heart, this meant that he had an even stronger trump card in hand, and could easily subdue him. He had not guessed wrongly on this part. However, even if Ling Han did not possess something like the Vajraseal, he could still easily recapture the Azura Demon Emperor. The Azura Demon Emperor's divine senses level was too low, after all. Ling Han needed only use the 7-kill subduing soul technique to knock him out, and then easily draw him into the Black Tower. By that time, he could then easily do with him as he liked. Ling Han healed his body first as it no longer was subject to the attack of the stone statues. With the channeling of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, his recovery abilities were amazing, and very soon, he became completely uninjured. He changed into a new suit of robes, and smilingly said, let's go. The 3 people and 1 puppet set off, continuing on their journey. On the way, Ling Han told Shui Yanyu and Ding Ping how he had obtained 3 divine seals and the puppet. The person buried here, who exactly is it? It doesn't feel like a tomb. How could he still be so leisurely and refined after death? Shui Yanyu and Ding Ping both felt that it was inconceivable. Just think, you could have just buried yourself good and proper, so why had you come up with so many antics? Unwilling to remain lonely? Ling Han murmured. In the end, no one could escape death. Perhaps this great elite sang his own praises because he did not want to be forgotten? The life essence here was very amazing. Not only could it advance one's cultivation level, it could also heal the hidden injuries one had received during cultivation, and fully nurture his body. This was a very immense help. Some simply chose not to continue exploring, thinking that their abilities were too weak, and they would not be able to win over the others. Hence, they found a quiet place, stopped, and began to cultivate and nurse themselves. Nursing their bodies to the prime condition was naturally beneficial to cultivation. Master, I have broken through. Only after a few days, Ding Ping thus exclaimed. With Ling Han's alchemical pills forcefully pouring into him, his cultivation level naturally increased rapidly. This was the immortal realm, and it was comparatively easy for one to advance in the mortal territory of cultivation levels. In terms of mental state, he had the reincarnation tree. If it were not for the fact that Ding Ping still had to advance to the pinnacle of 19 stars of strength, he could have broken through long ago. Ling Han stood guard for him. Even in the galaxy, the regulations of the heavenly Tao were everywhere. Immediately, divine thunder could be heard, and lightning began to strike madly at Ding Ping. Ding Ping had cultivated Shattering Void tier almost to perfection, but because he was not the master of a small world, he had no hope of reaching 20 stars of strength. However, 19 stars was still extremely awesome. This allowed his battle prowess to be incredibly frightening, and the heavenly tribulation he had to endure was relatively easier. After half a day, he had also advanced into immortal level. "Master, may I travel around on my own?" He was filled with longing, hoping that he could be like his three uncles, traveling extensively and learning through experience on his own. Ling Han smiled faintly, and asked, "So, your wings have hardened then?" Ding Ping was so scared he quickly knelt, and exclaimed, "Disciple dares not." Ling Han thought for a moment, then drew out the Swift Cloud Talisman, and handed it over to this disciple. He said, "Take it. In a dangerous situation, it will help you escape. In the future, we shall reunite at the entrance." "Master." Ding Ping was incredibly touched. This was something that his master had obtained by surviving the stone statue formation, and was extremely valuable. "Take it," Ling Han said smilingly. He had the cloud-piercing shuttle, so the Swift Cloud Talisman was not as useful to him as one would think. Ding Ping knelt and bowed respectfully towards Ling Han. Only then did he take the Swift Cloud Talisman, and left in big strides. "Are you really at ease?" Shui Yanyu questioned. Ling Han did not speak. After a while, he said, "The boy's grown up, so I should allow him to soar. Furthermore, when I was at the cultivation level that he is presently at, didn't I run all the way to the imperial capital on my own and woo myself a beautiful girl?" Shui Yanyu knew that he was teasing her, and couldn't help but roll her eyes. Yet, at the same time, she was slightly pleased. What woman did not like hearing her love compliment her on her beauty? Ling Han laughed loudly, wrapped his arms around this seductive beauty, and kissed her. Shui Yanyu was greatly embarrassed, and pointing at the Azura Demon Emperor, exclaimed, "There's still someone here." The Azura Demon Emperor was stunned, and hurriedly crouched down and barked like a dog. He even wanted to wag his tail, yet realized that he was no longer that wolf. Involuntarily, he felt a little awkward, and grinning sheepishly, said, "Mistress, don't think of this little Azura as a person." He was indeed quite shameless. Chapter 1104, Forest of the Sea. Ling Han and Shui Yanyu were intimate with each other, and if they begrudged the Azura Demon Emperor for being in the way, Ling Han would draw him into the Black Tower, which made the Azura Demon Emperor very exasperated. He really wanted to say that he was merely formed from a mass of chaotic demonic chi, and was not a human. You guys were merely embracing each other, but even if you did this and that, in his eyes, it was no different from looking at two dogs. Of course, he would not dare say such a thing even if he died. Otherwise, there was a chance that he would really be killed. Walking on this expansive plain, there seemed to be no end. This would make many people become impatient, and eventually give up. Time passed, day after day. Ling Han's and Shui Yenyu's cultivation level was soaring. With an alchemy emperor added with the reincarnation tree, it would be difficult for their cultivation levels not to soar. After half a month, Shui Yenyu's cultivation level had reached the late stage of the medium extreme. This was extremely amazing. Ling Han still needed a bit of time to reach the peak stage of the high extreme. After all, the higher the cultivation level, the slower one would be to advance. Finally, the expansive plains no longer appeared in front of their eyes. Instead, a massive sea appeared. However, this huge sea was incredibly strange. The bottom of the sea was connected to the plains. It could even be claimed that the plains were a part of the giant sea, and the seawater had merely been removed. Ahead of them, a wall of water suddenly appeared. It rose up from the horizon, and undulated there. Meanwhile, the seabed was no longer dull and lonely, containing nothing. Instead, a forest was growing there. Forest of the Sea. Every tree was rooted on the seabed, and had trunks that were several dozen thousand meters tall. However, they were very flexible. Rather than saying that they were trees, it would be more appropriate to call them weeds, though they looked a little shocking. The trees' leaves lightly waved. Most of them were even larger than a whole house, so if anyone hid behind them, it would be very difficult to discover their presence. The seawater had a very strong effect of blocking divine sense, and their vision was incapable of seeing through these leaves. Thus, even if those that entered here were not blind, the area still managed to decrease the level of sensitivity of divine sense greatly. Be careful of the dark night hall. Shui Yanyu warned immediately. Previously, because of the actions of the great elite, cultivators of different cultivation levels were separated without their knowledge, but when they came here, they had already seen elites of the Sun-Moon tier. It was obvious that the separated people had again been gathered together without their knowledge. The Dark Night Hall already knew that Ling Han was not easy to kill, so if they once again mobilized an assassin, he would definitely be at the Sun-Moon tier. Previously, it was impossible for them to meet, but now, that might not be the case. Perhaps one was lying in ambush in the forest of the sea, waiting for them. Ling Han nodded. He was confident, but was definitely not blindly conceited. With his present abilities, Sun-Moon tier would be able to insta-kill him. His physique of level 4 godly metal would be useless as well. Even if a few of his godly bones had not been shattered, his spirit would definitely collapse, and he would still die. To stand against Sun-Moon tier, even if it was the low extreme of Sun-Moon tier, he would have to reach the level of 10 stars at least. And to reach 10 stars in the Mountain River tier, he would have to first form the 5th Mountain River, and reach perfection in his cultivation. Ling Han was still a bit far from this step. Don't worry, Master. I will definitely do my best. As long as I am here, I will definitely ensure your safety. The Azura Demon Emperor said confidently, clapping his chest in assurance. Let's go. They entered into the forest of the sea. It was a good thing that there was a change, for it meant that they were walking in the right direction. Otherwise, if they continued to walk around in circles on the plain, where would the end be? Thankfully, the seawater merely shrank down the distance that divine sense could cover a great many times, and did not have special regulations suppressing them unlike in the Star Sea. Hence, even if a battle started in the water, the abilities of cultivators would not be weakened too much. There was not only the giant underwater forest here, there were also giant fishes swimming among the trees. They were really big fish, and were as long as a few dozen thousand meters. A flick of their fish tail, and a great tsunami would be caused. Even Sun-Moon tier elites would not be able to steady themselves, and would be swept out a great distance by the powerful waves. Even if these massive fishes were not demonic beasts, merely the strength of their physical bodies alone was already frightening enough. That was why strength was considered the very most important part of battle prowess. Even if these great fishes were not demonic beasts, their battle prowess was enough to shake even Sun-Moon tier elites. The weeds in the underwater forest possessed great toughness. Otherwise, they would have been torn apart with a few flicks of the tails of these colossal fishes. Ling Han and Shui Yanyu walked among them, feeling that they were pitifully small. Of course, not all creatures were so huge. Ling Han had seen a few small fishes, but these small fishes were also a few dozen meters long. However, compared to the bodies of the giant fishes, which were a few dozen thousand meters long, they really could only be called small fishes. However, while the big fishes were not violent, the small fishes were. The giant fishes could not bother to dally with cultivators, but the small fishes were extremely violent. The moment they discovered the presence of cultivators, they would immediately attack brazenly. These small fishes were very strange. All their scales were made of metal, and their teeth were as sharp as knives, flickering with a sinister light. They were very tough to deal with. Their metal scales had a very strong defensive effect, and their teeth were incredibly sharp. If a cultivator of the same level were to fight them, without extraordinary battle prowess, there was a high chance he would suffer a great deal. Ling Han, however, was not scared. Instead, he was pleased. He was just worrying about not having any level 2 godly metal to increase the might of the divine demon sword. Weren't these materials delivered right to his doorstep? Boom! A fish flicked its tail, producing a powerful movement. It charged over at Ling Han, and the water rippled as it moved, causing one to be unable to maintain his footing. Ling Han opened all the pores on his body, and poured out origin power. Suddenly, he shot out like an arrow, charging towards that fish. The power of this fish was only equivalent to the level of the medium extreme of Mountain River tier, so how could it be of any match for Ling Han? In a few moves, Ling Han had cleanly ripped off all the scales of its body, and it had become a naked fish. I will spare your life. Ling Han grinned. With a powerful toss, he threw the fish out. After absorbing the essence of godly metal of the fish scales, the divine demon sword experienced a sliver of a boost. Of course, it was only a sliver. However, not too long after, that fish swam back towards them. Its distinctive traits were too obvious. All its fish scales had been removed, and in this place, it should be the only one like this. However, it was not all on its lonesome. Instead, it had brought along a large school of its kind. At least a few hundred violent fishes charged over, every one of them bearing their sharp teeth, boiling with killing intent. How does it feel to have your good deed repaid with evil? Shui Yanyu teased. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, why do I feel like this is a gift instead? True, it was only a few hundred violent fishes. In front of him, they were completely lacking as opponents, and were merely here to increase the grade of the divine demon sword. He charged out, his divine demon sword flicking, stabbing, slicing, and slashing. Multiple fish scales were torn down by his strikes, and turned into dust. Their essence, meanwhile, was absorbed by the divine demon sword, allowing it to rapidly advance towards the level of level 3 godly metal. Even though there was only a few hundred fishes, it had to be known that these were only small fish. Even one was a few dozen meters long, so the amount of godly metal was incredibly shocking. When Ling Han had killed most of these fish, the divine demon sword suddenly shone brilliantly, and once again, a qualitative change took place. And in this process, Ling Han also inserted his martial intent within, instantly forming 23 divine patterns. Last time, Ling Han had been unprepared, and thus had only engraved 7 divine patterns, but he was prepared this time, so he was naturally able to lay down even more divine patterns. A level 3 god tool. Ling Han was overjoyed. He delivered a careless slash, and Hong, a 3,000-meter-long sword ray swept out. Pu, 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 pu. At least half of the violent fishes had been slashed in half by this sword ray. Chapter 1105, Tricolor Wind and Fire Lotus. Ling Han was very pleased he had not put much power into this blow. It was completely the power of the divine demon sword alone. It was obviously just a level 3 god tool, but because his martial intent was engraved on it, it actually possessed might above its level. It was definitely capable of matching a level 4 god tool. So even god tools could have tier-surpassing battle abilities? Shua, the remaining violent fish hurriedly flicked their tails, and fled in the opposite direction. Previously, Ling Han had merely descaled them, but did not kill them, which made these violent fishes have no qualms about attacking him, but when they discovered that this man was not a saint and was not to be trifled with, they naturally made a swift getaway. So this is the greatest divine sword in the world? Shui Yanyu had naturally seen Jin Zhihui, and knew that he had especially come to deliver a sword to Ling Han. Ling Han nodded, and replied, I owe him a huge favor. Shui Yanyu smiled, and said, this is definitely a big favor, but I believe that only in your hands would this sword really reach its pinnacle. For a swordsmith, this is what he would most want to see. Otherwise, if it was hidden in his own hands, it would only be covering a brilliant pearl with dirt. Wife, you are getting better and better at talking, your little mouth is really very sweet. Ling Han grinned, acting like he was about to pinch Shui Yanyu's cheek, causing the latter to directly roll her eyes at him, filled with irritation. I am really expectant. Let us have some even more powerful violent fish, and let this sword advance to the height of level 4 godly metal. Shui Yanyu peered into the distance, and abruptly turned ashen as she exclaimed, "You jinx!" A giant fish was swimming towards them. It was as much as a few thousand meters long, and though it was not the largest, when the waves it created surged towards them, they directly swept both Ling Han and Shui Yanyu away. They did not have the slightest ability to resist. The strength of this fish has reached Sun-Moon tier at least, Ling Han declared. The giant fish approached tumultuous, opened its huge mouth, and all the surrounding seawater suddenly began surging towards its mouth. Ling Han and Shui Yanyu were no exception either, as they were sucked along with the seawater, heading towards it. "Move!" Ling Han shouted. The Azura Demon Emperor quickly charged out. The power of Sun-Moon tier surged, and shooting out a fist, it compressed the seawater, forming a shock wave that continued to become bigger, and slammed towards the big fish. Pung! The massive fish was suddenly sent flying a few thousand meters. The strength behind this punch was extremely immense. A part of its body had even caved it, causing bloody water to seep out. The giant fish charged back in rage born from pain. With a sweep of its tail, a furious wave rolled out. The Azura Demon Emperor went to meet this strike. Though he was pitifully small in size, he did not lose in terms of strength. He shot out a fist in a direct confrontation with the giant fish, and both sides were sent flying back. The man and fish battled furiously. Neither of them were cultivators in the true essence of the word. One was a puppet, depending on true origin stones and formation patterns which allowed it to possess battle prowess of the Sun-Moon tier, whereas the other was gifted by nature, possessing a massive body and frightening strength. This was just like an ant. How long would it have to cultivate to be able to possess strength equivalent to a normal human's? The power on both sides was more or less equal. However, the puppet had an advantage in that it lacked the ability to feel pain, and its body was forged out of high-grade godly metal. Naturally, it had a huge lead, and after a few dozen moves, a great many scales had been torn off the giant fish, which began to bleed. It was afraid now. With a flick of its tail, it fled quickly. "Fuck, I am really too awesome now," the Azura Demon Emperor declared proudly. Being able to send an opponent of the Sun-Moon tier fleeing was something that he couldn't even begin to imagine doing in the past. This was too awesome. When he saw Ling Han walk over, the Azura Demon Emperor immediately wiped the conceit off his face, and switched to a pandering expression. He exclaimed, "I am really too grateful to you, Master. Master, you are like a second parent to me, the bright sun on the path that I am walking, wherever you shine is where light is." He began to ingratiate himself with Ling Han madly, completely having no idea what the word sickening meant. "Enough, enough. I'm about to vomit." Ling Han hurriedly waved him off, causing Shui Yanyu to purse her lips in an amused smile. Only then did the Azura Demon Emperor sheepishly become quiet, feeling that he had not praised enough. In any case, he could not possibly increase his abilities through cultivation, so he had been training his skill of sucking up these few days. It was so rare for him to have such a good opportunity to use this skill. He had not thought that just when he had barely started, he would be stopped, which made him a little depressed. Why did Master not allow him to show off his strength? After sinking deep into the Great Sea, this forest showed its magnificent appearance. These massive weeds were no longer of the same dark green color, but had become brilliantly colored. Some were purple, red, and orange, and the colors of the fishes had similarly become even richer and more colorful. However, the threat posed by these fishes increased further. These big giants obviously did not have the slightest tremor of origin power, yet were born with divine patterns, which gave them unique abilities. There were gigantic octopuses that would spit out ink when encountered, dyeing their surroundings completely black. Not only could they not even see the fingers on their own hands, even their divine sense would be completely blocked, causing one to become completely blind, and they could only submit themselves to attacks. There were giant fish that had multicolored sharp spikes growing from their heads. Ling Han watched one penetrate the body of another huge fish with a spike, killing the latter in a single move. And there were also others that possessed strong poison. There was completely no need for them to strike their opponents directly. The area they swam through was a zone of poison in itself. A great many giant fish directly turned over and died, killed easily by poison. This was a dangerous place. Big fish would eat small fish, and small fish would eat cultivators. Of course, when big fish feasted, they would not mind also eating a few cultivators as they did. Everywhere, there were the bones of giant fish. There were also severed body parts of cultivators. Usually, there would only be an arm, a leg, or a head, floating around in the huge sea. The cloud-piercing shuttle was not useful in this underwater area, so Ling Han did not use this god tool. When they met with giant fish below the medium extreme of Sun-Moon tier, he would have the Azura Demon Emperor deal with it, and if they encountered even stronger ones, they would hide into the Black Tower. They would only leave when the coast was clear. The fish here still had a bit of value. The bones of some fish were made of metal, their quality comparable to godly metal of the same level. Thus, as long as they met such fish, Ling Han would draw them into the Black Tower. In future, he could use them to increase the might of the divine demon sword. In a certain corner of the deep sea, Empress Luan Xing was standing opposite an old man, and near them, there was a tricolored lotus flower in full bloom. Even in such an environment, one could still smell its beautiful fragrance. As expected, this was a divine herb. Otherwise, how could it have attracted the attention of Empress Luan Xing? But that old man was actually capable of standing strong against her, showing that his abilities were definitely extraordinary. They both stood with hands crossed behind their backs. In a diameter of about 3 meters around them, there was actually not even a drop of seawater, which showed their powerful abilities, being capable of blocking even the seawater in this place. This is merely a tricolor wind and fire lotus, and would need at least a few million years to evolve into a 7-colored one. It is not of any use to you at all, so why don't you allow me to have it? I shall not take it for nothing, either. I am willing to part with 3 dragon fragrance pills as compensation. How about it? The old man asked. Tricolor wind and fire lotus was a unique treasure of heaven and earth. If a mountain river tier cultivator drew it into the space of his dantian, he would be nurtured by the divine lotus at all times. Not only would his cultivation rapidly accumulate, he could also communicate with the Tao of heaven and earth with the help of the divine lotus because it was a great treasure of the heaven and earth. Even the comprehension of his cultivation level would be amazingly accelerated. However, when the cultivator advanced into the Sun-Moon tier, the essence of the divine lotus would have been expended, and would naturally wilt. This was still a tricolored one. If it had reached 5 colors, it could be used by Sun-Moon tier cultivators, and for a 7-colored one, even heavenly body tier elites would treat it like an ultimate treasure. Chapter 1106, Crimson Fire Needle. Empress Luan Xing was enveloped in an aura of primal chaos. As she blinked, great stars materialized behind her back before quickly disappearing again. Those at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier could only possess 4 heavenly bodies, yet the materialization and vanishing of these heavenly bodies was far too frequent, so much so that it looked like there were countless heavenly bodies radiating behind her back. A boundless aura radiated from them, exuding her might as a ruler. She humphed, and said, "I'll give you 5 dragon fragrance pills." The elder faltered for a moment. I'm offering you 3 dragon fragrance pills so you can give up on this tricolor wind and fire lotus, yet you're offering me 5 back. Are you trying to defeat me with your wealth? In any case, dragon fragrance pills were extremely valuable pills that could increase a heavenly body tier elite's comprehension of the great Tao. The elder had offered 3 dragon fragrance pills as there was a descendant he really adored. This descendant had just broken through to the mountain river tier, and with the help of this tricolor wind and fire lotus, they would be able to complete the mountain river tier in just 1,000 years, or perhaps even several hundred years. Moreover, it would help them reach perfection in all of the minor levels. If it weren't for his descendant, this tricolor wind and fire lotus would have been completely useless to him. As such, how could he have offered such a high price? Of course, one could also plant the lotus if they had enough patience. After absorbing the essence of heaven and earth for a few 100 million years, it would perhaps become a 7-colored wind and fire lotus. After tens of billions of years, it would perhaps become a 9-colored wind and fire lotus. However, who could wait for such a long time? The elder pondered for a moment before nodding, and saying, "Fine, 5 dragon fragrance pills. The tricolor wind and fire lotus is yours." Empress Wuque casually tossed a spatial ring toward the elder. She was extremely domineering, and she never hesitated with what she did. She started to stride toward the lotus. "Wait," the elder shouted. He extended his arm to block her. Killing intent appeared on Empress Wuque's face. Was the elder going back on their deal? I'm not one to go back on my word. However, don't you think you should let me verify the authenticity of the dragon fragrance pills first? Empress Wuque didn't speak. However, she stopped walking toward the tricolor wind and fire lotus. The elder's request wasn't excessive. After all, who would trust a stranger? The elder retrieved a vial of pills from the spatial ring. Then, he unplugged the cork and poured an alchemical pill out. He studied it for a while, and a smile eventually appeared on his face. He nodded, and said, "You're indeed a trustworthy person." Empress Wuque walked before the lotus and started to carefully dig it out. She had to be careful. This was because the lotus had to be in perfect condition when it was placed into a cultivator's dantian. Otherwise, its effects would fall dramatically. She retrieved a cloth pouch that was only as big as a person's palm. However, it was easily able to hold the lotus that measured 3 feet in height. She tied the pouch to her waist. Spatial spirit tools couldn't hold living beings. This was something that everyone understood. So, what could one do when they wanted to relocate godly medicine plants? Wouldn't one suffer a huge loss if their godly medicine was accidentally injured during transportation? Thus, virtual pouches were born. These pouches could forcefully restrain a domain of space, thus giving it the ability to hold living beings. As such, they could ensure the safety of godly medicines. However, the space that was restrained by these pouches was especially unstable. Generally speaking, they could only hold plants. If animals were placed inside, the restrained space would be severely affected. In fact, it would even crumble at the slightest of stimulations. Even with so many constraints, the lifespan of a virtual pouch was still relatively short. However, the advantage was that they could be refined by heavenly body tier elites, unlike spatial god tools which could only be refined by those at the Genesis tier. The elder watched on from the side. Once Empress Wuque placed the lotus into the virtual pouch, he immediately charged toward her. 4 heavenly bodies hovered behind him, each of them exuding a profoundly ancient aura. Boom! He immediately unleashed his trump card. He needed time to prepare this, but Empress Wuque had been focused on digging the godly medicine just then. This gave him the opportunity and time to prepare. This strike was extremely devastating. The seawater around them instantly disappeared, and the gigantic fish within a 500-kilometer radius all exploded and died. Meanwhile, the elder's most powerful attack transformed into a black spear that continued to stab toward Empress Wuque's waist. He still wanted to obtain the tricolor wind and fire lotus. Empress Wuque flared up in rage. She roared softly, and her slender hands pressed backward, causing thousands of divine patterns to intertwine and knit into a net that flew toward the elder. A ruler was enraged, and heaven and earth lost their luster. They were both at the heavenly body tier, yet Empress Wuanxing was clearly more powerful. Her net enveloped the black spear and ripped it to shreds. Pooh! A crimson light shot through the net at this moment, whizzing toward Empress Wuanxing's neck. Empress Wuanxing hurriedly dodged to the side. However, the crimson light followed her movement with incredible accuracy and speed. In the end, it pierced into her hand. Ha ha ha! The elder laughed heartily, appearing especially smug. Your Majesty, you've already been hit by Crimson Fire Needle. If I don't remove its effects, your blood will be evaporated drop by drop. You'll die an extremely miserable death. Hand the Tricolor Wind and Fire Lotus over, and I can spare you from death. You're a beautiful woman, after all, and it'll be a shame for you to die like this. There was a peculiar glint flashing in the elder's eyes. She was a breathtaking beauty, yet she had been captured by him. Moreover, she was also the empress of a majestic empire. If he could make her his obedient slave, what kind of power would fall into his hands? Great stars hovered behind Empress Wuanxing's back. The aura that they exuded made one shudder, with even the elder's heart thumping in palpitation. Too powerful, she's too powerful. We're both at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier, so why is the difference between us so large? Fortunately, she had given him enough time to unleash his most powerful attack. He had more so been able to use an ancient god tool. That Crimson Fire Needle had been launched by his saint-destroying crossbow. What was a saint? Only those who reached the Genesis tier could be referred to as saints. Meanwhile, this treasure was called the saint-destroying crossbow, which revealed just how mighty it was. However, the saint-destroying crossbow that the elder had received was a damaged one. Thus, it couldn't even kill elites at the Eternal River tier, much less the Genesis tier. However, it was still extremely effective against those at the Heavenly Body tier. You're a member of the Dark Night Hall? Empress Wuanxing didn't move, instead choosing to question the elder in a solemn tone. The elder's heart jolted. How did she guess? Did I slip up somewhere? However, there was no doubt that she had been hit by the Crimson Fire Needle. Thinking of this, the elder became relaxed again. Indeed. He confidently admitted his identity, and said, "How did you find out?" Empress Wuanxing didn't answer his question, instead saying, "In that case, this was a trap all along. You discovered the Tricolor Wind and Fire Lotus, and I also happened to be nearby. You realized that I would come over sooner or later, so you purposefully pretended that you discovered it at the same moment as me. However, you were taking that as an opportunity to kill me. Hee, your Majesty is so wise. Everything is as you said." Now that it had come to this, the elder didn't hide his intentions anymore, saying, "However, I suggest you rid yourself of your fanciful thoughts, your Majesty. The more time you waste, the more of your blood will be evaporated." "Detestable thief!" Empress Wuanxing said in contempt. She raised her jade-like hand, and boundless might formed, releasing a terrifying pressure. The elder's expression changed drastically. She was hit by the Crimson Fire Needle, so how can she still wield her power? Wasn't her origin power all evaporated a long time ago? Chapter 1107, Might of the Empress. Empress Wuanxing moved, and streaks of regulations transformed into divine chains that flew out from her jade-like palm and rained down on the elder from the Dark Night Hall. This elder was definitely one of the strongest members of the Dark Night Hall. How many people in this universe could cultivate to the consummate level of the heavenly body tier? Moreover, what kind of treasure was the saint-destroying crossbow? It was definitely a supreme treasure of the Dark Night Hall. However, this elder could bring it out, so he was definitely an upper-level individual at the Dark Night Hall. Light radiated from the elder's body as he let out a roar. He had looked extremely old just then, yet his life essence was soaring through the heavens at this moment. He was fighting with his life on the line. Crush him. Empress Luan Xing cried softly. Countless divine chains swarmed about as her hands pressed down. This was the manifestation of Tao, and it could display one's comprehension of the great Tao of heaven and earth. The elder combusted his blood essence. He still believed that the Empress had been hit by his crimson fire needle, meaning that her blood was still being continuously evaporated. She was definitely a spent force, and she definitely couldn't last for much longer. As long as he endured through this, the seductive beauty who was renowned throughout the galaxy would become his plaything. His heart rippled with excitement as this thought crossed his mind. His mental state, which he had cultivated for tens of millions of years, became like that of a lustful youth. He was feeling extremely thirsty. I'll achieve victory as long as I endure through this. Capturing this proud Empress was probably the dream of countless elites. If he succeeded, how satisfied would his vanity be? Pang! The elder was sent flying with a single strike. In fact, even his origin power armor disappeared. Seawater rushed toward him, drenching his hair and his clothes. Wah! The elder spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was filled with shock, and he stammered, "How is your power still so strong?" They were both at the peak stage of the consummate level of the heavenly body tier, and he was more so a 4-star genius. Theoretically speaking, Empress Luan Xing only possessed a battle prowess that was 1 star more powerful than him. However, judging by their exchange just then, the difference between their battle prowess was definitely more than 1 star. It was at least 3 stars. How is this possible? How? Empress Luan Xing didn't reply, instead saying, "Treacherous thief, die." She had the mindset of a ruler, and the world had to listen to her commands. No one was allowed to defy her. The elder retrieved a helmet and put it on. Regulations of the great Tao instantly flowed down from the helmet, intertwining to form divine patterns that stuck to his body. At a rough glance, there were at least 1,000 divine patterns. He was a super elite to begin with, so he already possessed over 3,000 divine patterns. Add to that the 1,000 from the helmet, and the aura that radiated from his body instantly soared explosively. Right now, he was already no weaker than Empress Luan Xing. "Kakaka, don't forget that I'm from the Dark Night Hall," the elder said arrogantly. "We've existed for even longer than the 3 majestic empires, so the richness of resources that we possess is far beyond your majesty's imagination. You're nothing but a weakling who relies on external tools." Empress Luan Xing said coldly. Her divine chains transformed into sabers, spears, swords, and crossbows as they rained down from the sky. This was truly terrifying. It was as if the sky were about to collapse, and it was as if even the heavens wanted to punish the elder from the Dark Night Hall. The elder's expression changed drastically. He had clearly activated a high-level god tool already, yet at this moment, he had no confidence that he could win. He felt that the seductive beauty opposite him was powerful enough to make his hair stand on ends. He finally retrieved a black crossbow that was engraved with complex divine patterns. However, this crossbow was damaged, and many of the divine patterns only had half or even just a third of their patterns remaining. Even so, this didn't stop the crossbow from being powerful. The elder didn't hide the existence of this crossbow with his power anymore, and the space around them was instantly permeated by a terrifying killing intent. It was as if this aura could kill gods and slay saints. Saint-destroying crossbow. "Your Majesty, I suggest that you surrender." I brought 3 crimson fire needles this time, and you've already been hit by one of them. If you're hit by another, even I won't be able to save you. I can only watch a beauty die before my eyes. Empress Luan Xing didn't take his words to heart. She pressed her palm down, and the entire world instantly became dark. Countless divine chains slithered down, moving to slay the elder. Humph! A fierce look appeared in the elder's eyes. Although he wanted to capture this seductive beauty, his own life was far more important in comparison. At this moment, he didn't have any crooked thoughts anymore. He lashed out with his palm, causing thousands of divine patterns to intertwine and form a wall before him. Meanwhile, he activated the Saint-destroying crossbow. He was going to launch an earth-shattering attack. In terms of strength, he was a few pegs below Empress Luanxing. However, the helmet on his head increased his strength and mitigated at least 1 star of difference between them. Thus, even if he wasn't her opponent, at least he wouldn't be defeated in an instant. He was buying time to activate the Saint-destroying crossbow. With this and the Crimson Fire Needles, even heavenly body tier elites would suffer certain defeat. Even if 1 Crimson Fire Needle weren't enough, there were still another 2. The Saint-destroying crossbow was finally activated. The quality of this god tool was far too high, and even though the Elder possessed an astonishing power, he still felt strained after activating it for 2 times in quick succession. Sweat raced down his forehead, and even his aura started to become unstable. However, now that the Saint-destroying crossbow was activated, a devastating aura instantly swept through the space around them. This was still a Saint tool, even though it was damaged and its might was reduced. A serious expression appeared on Empress Luanxing's face. She didn't dare to be careless before such kind of Saint tool. As she roared softly, 9 mountains materialized behind her back and crashed down on the Elder. Go! The Elder gritted his teeth, not having any more thoughts of getting lucky. He fired the Crimson Fire Needle using the Saint-destroying crossbow. A crimson light whizzed out and directly pierced through Empress Luanxing's Regulations defense, continuing to fly toward her after it did so. The Elder chuckled coldly. Once the Saint-destroying crossbow was fired, its target would definitely be hit. This was unless one was more powerful than the Saint-destroying crossbow. Meanwhile, the Crimson Fire Needle could rapidly evaporate a cultivator's blood. Even heavenly body tier elites wouldn't be able to last for long. The Empress had already been struck once, yet she was still able to endure for the time being. However, the Elder didn't believe that she could endure being struck again. Empress Luanxing had still dodged before, yet she didn't even make an attempt to dodge this time. The crimson light pierced through her chest. She's done for. The Elder was happy yet regretful at the same time. The Empress was definitely going to die after being hit by 2 Crimson Fire Needles. Even he wouldn't be able to save her. It was a great shame that this stunning beauty was going to die before he had even gotten the chance to savor her. However, a suspicious, even terrified look instantly appeared on his face. This was because Empress Luanxing was standing before him unscathed. Her vitality soared through the sky, while her domineering might was no weaker than before. What part of her looked like someone who had been struck by 2 Crimson Fire Needles? Die! After dealing with the Elder's attack, Empress Luanxing launched into a ferocious offensive. The space and the surroundings was shattered by her palm. The Elder gritted his teeth, not a shred of fighting spirit left in him. He frantically turned around to flee. Empress Luanxing pursued him for a few steps before suddenly coming to a halt. Her aura had become slightly unstable. I was struck by his first surprise attack, and even my 9 Deaths Heaven art was unable to completely suppress the Crimson Fire Needle. Luckily, I was prepared the second time, and was able to use this peculiar stone to block his attack. Assassins from the Dark Night Hall were naturally terrifying. The Saint-destroying crossbow was more so a precious treasure that could suppress heavenly body tier elites. Humph, I'll slaughter you even if you escape to the ends of the world. She started to pursue him. Chapter 1108, Assassin. Ling Han suddenly stopped in his tracks. What's wrong? Shui Yanyu asked. Ling Han pondered for a moment, and replied, I have a nagging feeling that someone's following us. Is it the Dark Night Hall? Or is it Zhao Luan or Xiaowak? Shui Yanyu listed the possibilities. However, a bitter smile instantly appeared on her face. There were truly quite a lot of people who wanted to kill Ling Han. Ling Han thought for a moment, and said, "It can't be Zhao Luan. He's with Great General Zhao, and with Great General Zhao's status, there's no need for him to follow me sneakily. If he wants to kill me, he'll do so directly. It can't be Xia Wuque either, as there aren't any Sun-Moon tier elites by his side. After seeing my defenses, he won't come over to ask for a beating. It's most probably the Dark Night Hall." Ling Han made his judgment. If it's the Dark Night Hall, why haven't they attacked yet? Could it be that the assassin is not strong enough, so they're currently calling for reinforcement from other elites? Shui Yanyu also started to speculate. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "This place is unfamiliar to everyone, and it's even impossible to differentiate north from south. How can they describe my location?" "Indeed. Since no one has ever been here before, how can they give our location to others without having a map to reference?" A troubled expression appeared on Shui Yenyu's face. She clapped her hands, and said, "Since that's the case, the assassin probably hasn't appeared because they're too weak." "Not necessarily." Ling Han didn't agree with this, and he said, "Perhaps they know of Little Azura's existence, and also know that he's not an easy opponent. Thus, they're searching for a better opportunity to strike." "That's right." Shui Yenyu hurriedly nodded in agreement. She had subconsciously overlooked the Azura Demon Emperor's existence. The main reason for this was because he continued to use shameless methods to make his presence known. How could she think, "Oh, he's also an elite"? Huh? Why haven't I detected anything out of the ordinary? The Azura Demon Emperor asked. There was a confused look on his face. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "Although you've entered a Sun-Moon tier puppet, your own power is still only at the Mountain River tier. In other words, your divine sense is still too weak. Moreover, this place can weaken the perception of one's divine sense, so it's extremely normal that you aren't able to detect anything abnormal." A dispirited expression instantly appeared on the Azura Demon Emperor's face. He couldn't raise his cultivation level in the immortal realm, and this left him feeling extremely dissatisfied. "Rather than letting them follow us, why don't we lure them out of hiding?" Ling Han rubbed his chin in thought. If there were someone continually following behind him, he would feel extremely restricted when doing things. For example, he wouldn't be able to enter and exit the Black Tower as he pleased, as this would risk exposing his secrets. "How are we going to lure them?" Shui Yenyu asked. "We'll have Little Azura run far away," Ling Han said with a smile. He had the Vajra seal and the Lion seal, and thus he wasn't afraid of Sun-Moon tier elites, even if they were at the pinnacle of the Sun-Moon tier. "Master, you don't want the loyal Little Azura anymore?" The Azura Demon Emperor instantly acted like a cute puppy. It was a shame that there was no tail for him to wag. "Piss off." Ling Han couldn't stand him, and he immediately kicked him aside. "Master." The Azura Demon Emperor instantly flew several hundred kilometers away. A smile appeared on Ling Han's face, and he said, "Let's hope that the assassin will appear sooner rather than later. Otherwise, it'll feel like there's a poisonous snake spying on us the entire time." There was a look of worry on Shui Yenyu's face. If the assassin attacked, they would definitely be an elite at the Sun-Moon tier. Perhaps they wouldn't even give Ling Han the opportunity to hide into his Black Tower or use his divine seals. "Don't worry, your hubby isn't any ordinary person," Ling Han said with a chuckle. "Girl, flash me a smile." This made Shui Yenyu laugh, and she rolled her eyes at him in annoyance. The two of them continued forward, and the Azura Demon Emperor heeded the command to keep his distance from them. He purposefully created an opportunity for the assassin. One day later. He. There was a burst of cold laughter, and a figure instantly appeared before Ling Han and Shui Yenyu. This was a bony middle-aged man who appeared especially ugly. Only the occasionally appearing sun and moon behind his back signified that he was an elite who had reached the low extreme of the sun-moon tier. No wonder he didn't appear before. Sure enough, his battle prowess is weaker than that of the Azura Demon Emperor. Brat, I know that you purposefully sent that puppet away to create an opportunity for me, the assassin said with a cold chuckle. Although I don't know why, but, do you really think that you can escape from me? There's a definitive difference in power, and no amount of scheming will be able to change this. Ling Han chuckled, and said, You finally appeared. Say, you're a sun-moon tier elite, after all, so don't you feel ashamed for tailing 2 mountain river tier cultivators? You're seeking death, the middle-aged assassin said with a cold humph. He immediately charged toward Ling Han. He was an assassin, so killing his target was naturally the most important thing. He had only endured and stayed in hiding because he had feared the Azura Demon Emperor. Now that this threat was gone, there was nothing else that he needed to worry about. All he needed to do was kill his target. Boom! Boundless black light surged from his body and transformed into a giant spear that stabbed toward Ling Han. Lion Seal. Ling Han retrieved a divine seal and slapped it onto his body. He instantly felt a terrifying power course through his body. Hundreds of divine patterns materialized on his skin. Apart from mountains and rivers and suns and moons, there was another more direct method to determine one's cultivation, that was to look at how many divine patterns one possessed. Mountain river tier cultivators possessed less than 100, sun-moon tier cultivators possessed less than 1,000, heavenly body tier cultivators possessed less than 10,000, and so on. Right now, there were a whopping 800 divine patterns on Ling Han's body. Pung! Ling Han swung his fist, and his origin power formed into a large hand then smashed into the black spear. The black spear instantly crumbled into dust upon coming in contact with the large hand, which continued to surge toward the middle-aged assassin. Fuck! The middle-aged assassin was instantly scared witless. There were 800 divine patterns, 800. One had to realize that even elites at the consummate level of the sun-moon tier generally only possessed 300 or so divine patterns. This was because possessing 1,000 divine patterns meant that one was already at the level of the best sun-moon tier elites. So, what kind of concept was 800 divine patterns? This meant that one was almost at the level of pseudo-heavenly body tier elites. He would be crushed into pulp if he were scraped by just a tiny bit of the large hand, let alone being hit by it head-on. He frantically used his movement techniques in a bid to escape. Boom! Fortunately, his reaction had been fast enough. A vacuum appeared near the seabed as the fist smashed down, while he was swept hundreds of meters away by the surging waves. A figure flashed over, and Ling Han appeared before him again. The middle-aged assassin's face almost became green with terror. Although he had some life-saving treasures, none of them could block power at the pseudo-heavenly body tier. This was an overwhelming power. He could only flee as if his life depended on it. Only now did he realize just how incredible his target's trump cards were. No wonder he had sent that powerful puppet away. It was because he had been luring him out, not because he was arrogant beyond belief. Huh! He yelped in surprise because he suddenly sensed a familiar aura. Tai Feng, Elder Tai Feng. He was overcome with delight. Elder Tai Feng was an upper-level being of the Dark Night Hall, and he was definitely an elite. He was at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. Huh, I can't believe I came across him here. Everything's settled now. Even if Ling Han has special techniques to raise his power to the pseudo-heavenly body tier, he's still no match genuine heavenly body tier elites. Moreover, Elder Tai Feng is at the peak stage of the consummate level of the heavenly body tier, and he's more so a 4-star elite. Chapter 1109, Done For. Xiao. An elder streaked over, and his powerful aura made it feel as if the sky were collapsing. One could barely breathe under the pressure of his aura. A supreme elite at the heavenly body tier. Ling Han's expression instantly became serious as he hurriedly started retreating. He was no match for such an elite, and he would have to seek refuge in his black tower even if this meant exposing the secret of his spatial god tool. Otherwise, his fate would be death. He rushed to Shui Yenyu's side before picking her up, and he was just about to enter the black tower. However, he suddenly faltered before he could enter. This was because he sensed another powerful aura. In fact, this aura was even more powerful than the heavenly body tier elders. Moreover, it seemed a little familiar. It's Empress Luan Xing. He immediately decided not to enter the Black Tower upon realizing this. Instead, he remained where he was, quietly waiting for things to play out. Elder Tai Feng. The middle-aged assassin was both surprised and delighted. However, he didn't realize that Elder Tai Feng was extremely disheveled at this moment. His clothes were in tatters, and they were more so drenched in blood. A regulation divine chain ferociously whipped over like a spear and caught up to Elder Tai Feng. Pooh! The divine chain pierced through his shoulder before trapping him in place. Elder Tai Feng was in an extremely sorry state. He had already been pursued by Empress Luan Xing for 1 day and 1 night, and he had already used all of the techniques that he could. However, all this was to no avail. Before this Empress, his resistance was futile. He didn't dare to counterattack. Instead, he used his hand like a sword and sliced down toward his own shoulder. Blood sprayed through the air as half of his shoulder was cut off. However, the divine chain that was holding him in place also lost its effects. Yet just as he was about to flee again, a large white hand descended from the sky. This hand was slender and as smooth as jade, and it was filled with a sense of beauty. However, in Elder Tai Feng's eyes, this hand was like a talisman of death. A look of despair spread across his face. He had already used all of his trump cards. He couldn't block this attack. Boom! The large hand pressed down, and Elder Tai Feng was ruthlessly smashed into the bottom of the sea. When the large hand disappeared, it could be seen that at least 1/3 of his bones had been broken. He continuously coughed blood, and his aura had already fallen to an extremely low level. Elder Tai Feng. The middle-aged assassin almost wet his pants in fright. In his eyes, Elder Tai Feng was the #1 assassin in the world. There was no one that he couldn't kill. It wouldn't matter even if one were more powerful than Elder Tai Feng. Assassins wouldn't fight against their targets head-on. Instead, they would search for the best opportunity to launch a fatal strike. They would immediately leave after their attempt, regardless of whether they succeeded or failed. Generally speaking, heavenly body tier elites were extremely hard to kill. Who could stop them if they were hell-bent on escaping? However, a whopping 10 heavenly body tier elites had died at the hands of Elder Tai Feng. This was enough to prove just how terrifying this elite assassin was. But now? He was lying on the ground like a dead dog. He wasn't faking death, was legitimately unable to crawl up. The middle-aged assassin trembled in terror. Who was pursuing Elder Tai Feng? Their power was truly heaven-defying. Wang! A devastating aura swept over as Empress Luan Xing appeared. She was dressed in a brilliant yellow imperial robe, and there was also a vermilion cloak billowing behind her back. It was 3 or so meters long, and it billowed with a domineering might even though she was at the bottom of the sea. Of course, her breathtaking figure was also like a magnet to the eyes. It was flawless, and it could easily entrance those who laid eyes upon it. Empress Luan Xing, the middle-aged assassin, stammered. As a qualified assassin, he naturally recognized Empress Luan Xing, one of the most powerful elites of the galaxy. He gulped with great difficulty. Everyone said that Empress Luan Xing was powerful, and she was also one of the 3 rulers of the joint peace planet. He hadn't believed this before, and he had felt that this empress had merely ascended the throne thanks to her stunning looks. Now, however, he finally realized just how wrong he had been. "Please spare me, Your Majesty." Elder Typhon wailed in misery, and said, "I'm willing to submit to Your Majesty, and I'm willing to become Your Majesty's dog and slave." He was an assassin, not a martyr. Compared to his life, what was his dignity worth? Empress Luan Xing ignored him completely. She slammed another palm down, and it was as if the world were shattering and heaven and earth were splitting open. Boom! Elder Typhon was smashed into pulp by this terrifying palm strike. Both his body and his soul were destroyed. Meanwhile, the middle-aged assassin was caught up in a tiny bit of the shock wave, yet this was enough to shred him into nothingness. So powerful. Ling Han thought to himself. This was the first time he had seen Empress Luan Xing unleash her true might. Her battle prowess was overwhelming enough to make heaven and earth lose their luster. Empress Luan Xing swept her gaze over Ling Han and Shui Yenyu as she landed on the ground. Then, she suddenly started to walk toward them. Ling Han's heart shuddered. Although they were all from the same majestic empire, he still had to remain vigilant. Moreover, the mind of a ruler was even harder to understand. Who knew what the Empress was thinking? Empress Luan Xing suddenly stumbled, and the aura of primal chaos that enveloped her also became unstable. A supreme elite at the heavenly body tier actually stumbled as they walked? Ling Han instantly understood. Although Empress Luan Xing had killed a supreme elite of the Dark Night Hall, she had also paid a price. That's right, she was definitely targeted by a surprise attack as well. Going by the Dark Night Hall's habits, they'll only attack if they have a 70 or 80% chance of success. "Are you alright, Your Majesty?" Ling Han asked hurriedly. This question was only an excuse to slow her down. Her target was clearly Shui Yenyu. "Move over." Empress Luan Xing chided. She extended an arm and sent Ling Han to the side. She then grabbed Shui Yenyu's hand, and was just about to bite down on her wrist. Ling Han was startled, and he instantly dashed over to protect her, not having the time to bother with anything else. He didn't have any other thoughts at this moment. There was only one thing running through his mind as a man: what was the point of living if he couldn't even protect his own women? Gasp! He felt a sharp pain on his neck, and his skin that was as tough as level 4 godly metal was instantly pierced open. To his surprise, Empress Luan Xing had actually bitten down on his neck, and was now sucking on his blood. "Are you a fucking vampire?" Ling Han wanted to resist, and he instinctively raised his arm to push her. However, how could he contend with the power of a heavenly body tier elite? His action was in vain, completely futile. His blood continued to flow out, and his consciousness began to fade. Meanwhile, Shui Yenyu was stupefied by what she saw because right now, the postures of Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing were far too dubious. One was biting the other's neck, and it was as if they were kissing. As for the other, his hands were resting on Empress Luan Xing's voluptuous breasts in a grabbing action, no less. He's done for. He's done for. Shui Yenyu felt as if the world were becoming dark. Who didn't know that the Empress was as clean as ice and as pure as jade? Although she was loved and admired by many men, even including supreme rulers like the Eternity Sky Emperor and the Jade Drop Emperor, she didn't think anything of any of them. Right now, however, she was actually being sexually assaulted by Ling Han. Who would care whether he had done this on purpose or not? The important thing was that it had happened. When Empress Luan Xing came to her senses, would Ling Han still be able to live? At this moment, she truly hated Ling Han's guts. Why did he have to interfere? He should have just let the Empress suck on her blood. Immortals had a powerful vitality anyway, and she would have only suffered a severely wounded vitality had her blood been sucked dry. However, she wouldn't die because of this. However, Ling Han was certainly going to die now. She suddenly reached a resolute decision in her mind. She drew her sword and ruthlessly stabbed it toward Empress Wuanxing's back. Chapter 11:10, Getting Lucky. If only one of them could survive, Shui Yanyu naturally wished that it would be Ling Han. She didn't care what would happen to the joint peace planet after Empress Wuanxing died, nor did she care that she and Ling Han would be hunted by heavens knew how many people. She didn't care about all that. At this moment, she only wished that Ling Han could live on. Pa! However, her sword was caught and tightly held by a hand. She couldn't stab it forward any further. It was Empress Wuanxing. She had already raised her head and turned around. Although Shui Yanyu couldn't see her expression, she believed that it was definitely one of rage and fury. Her own subject actually dared to assassinate her? This was high treason. A boundless killing intent swept outward, bringing with it the domineering might of the Empress. The color instantly drained from Shui Yanyu's face. However, she was unafraid. She simply looked at Ling Han lovingly. They couldn't live together, but they could at least die together. Yet, the fatal blow that she was expecting never arrived. She couldn't help but feel puzzled. She looked toward the Empress, only to see that she was enveloped in an aura of primal chaos. It was impossible to discern her expression. Ling Han's body shuddered as he slowly regained consciousness. The large loss of blood had caused him to faint, yet his divine sense was extremely powerful and tough, so he was naturally able to regain consciousness quickly. He reached out and grabbed onto Empress Wuanxing's wrist, a firm expression on his face. If you want to punish anyone, punish me. He was extremely weak, yet his tone was surprisingly firm. Empress Wuanxing flared up in rage. She was as clean as ice and as pure as jade, yet she had actually drunk a smelly man's blood. This made her feel as if she had been soiled. She raised her hand resolutely, and 4 heavenly bodies materialized behind her back. Each of the heavenly bodies radiated with a devastating aura, causing Ling Han's skin to instantly crack apart. However, his blood had already been sucked dry, and thus not a single drop of blood flowed out from his wounds. It was an extremely uncanny sight. You're returning kindness with hatred. Ling Han obviously wouldn't lie down and wait for death, and he immediately said, "Don't think that I don't know. You were wounded just then, and you sucked my blood in order to stabilize your situation. Or perhaps you used some kind of secret technique. So what?" Empress Wuanxing said coldly. Her target had originally been Shui Yanyu, and she wouldn't have killed her anyway. Had there been a need for Ling Han to interfere? Pay. She had been forced to suck the blood of this man, and they had even come into close and intimate contact. Just thinking about this gave her the goosebumps. It was nauseating to the extreme. As a ruler, you have to distinguish between kindness and hatred. If you kill us, you'll become an incompetent and morally bankrupt ruler. Ling Han spat out whatever he could think of. They had fallen into the hands of a heavenly body tier elite now, and they didn't have the ability to enter the Black Tower either. Thus, he naturally had to come up with other methods to save their lives. So what if I betray everyone in the world? Empress Wuanxing didn't fall into his trap, and continued, "Do you have any last words?" Fuck. You're not playing by the rules. Ling Han racked his brains for ideas. However, the difference in their power was too great, so it seemed as if all of his ideas would be useless. Humph. Empress Wuanxing struck her palm toward Ling Han's head. Ling Han was out of options. He had to use the power small tower even if it meant exposing the secret of the Black Tower. If worse came to worst, he would just flee to the ends of the world. He had entered the immortal realm now, and both heaven and earth were boundlessly large. It wasn't like the incredibly tiny small world, where elites would be able to find him easily. However, Empress Wuanxing suddenly stopped her attack halfway. Damn it, the Empress cursed in her mind. The ninth king's thoughts suddenly appeared in her mind at this moment, preventing her from continuing her strike. She wanted to sever these thoughts, yet this would lead to extremely serious consequences. It would dissolve her 1,000,000 years of hard work into nothingness. As expected, she had prevented their relationship too late. The ninth king had already developed good feelings toward this detestable man, and these very feelings were affecting her now. She steeled her heart and went to strike her palm down again, yet a feeling of intense anguish instantly welled up in her heart. This caused her to stop again. Damn it! Damn it! Empress Wuque humphed as she tossed Ling Han aside, and said in a frosty voice, "The events of today never happened." After saying this, she leaped into the air and instantly vanished from their sights. How unreasonable! Ling Han said with a grimace. He had already circulated a drop of indestructible true fluid. However, indestructible true fluid was used to treat wounds, and he wasn't genuinely wounded. He had only lost a great deal of vitality, and thus even the indestructible true fluid wasn't able to help him recover completely. His face was still as white as a sheet. Shui Yanyu felt as if she had just woken up from a dream. They had actually escaped death. Master, little Azura has missed you dearly. The Azura Demon Emperor appeared, a look of fright and terror on his face. Fuck the hell off. Ling Han kicked him aside. As expected, he couldn't be relied upon. When Empress Wuque had been present, he hadn't even dared to appear. Now that she was gone, he had hurriedly scuttled back over. This wasn't surprising, though. Even if the Azura Demon Emperor had returned, he would have merely been running to his own death. Thus, Ling Han only kicked him aside to vent his own anger. He didn't actually have any ill intentions. Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief, and said, "Phew, we weren't killed. How extremely fortunate." He would just pretend that he had been bitten by a dog. There were heaps of medicine in the Black Tower anyway, so he wouldn't need long to recover his vitality. Shui Yanyu rolled her eyes at him, and said, "Do you know that you indecently assaulted Her Majesty just then?" Huh? There was a puzzled expression on Ling Han's face, and he said, "Are you kidding? I was almost sucked dry just then. How could I have indecently assaulted that woman?" Humph. I saw it clearly with my own two eyes. Both of your hands had grabbed onto Her Majesty's breasts. There was a strong feeling of jealousy in Shui Yanyu's voice. Her mind had been filled with worry for Ling Han at that time, and now that they were safe, she naturally started to feel jealous. What? Ling Han was stunned, and he raised his hands in disbelief. These two hands had actually grabbed Empress Wuque's voluptuous breasts. Fuck. Why couldn't he recall this at all? He hadn't felt anything. Shui Yanyu humphed, and said, "Do you still want more? Are you lost in the beautiful memories?" Sure enough, men couldn't be trusted. Why are you feeling jealous? Ling Han pulled her into his arms, and said, "I almost died just then, so how could I have thought about such matters?" A look of lingering fear appeared on Shui Yanyu's face. One of them had grabbed the Empress' breasts, while the other had attempted to assassinate her. However, none of them had died. This was an incredible miracle. My wife still feel better. Ling Han chuckled softly as he cupped his hands over Shui Yanyu's chihuahua-sized one breasts. They truly felt amazing. Pervert. Shui Yanyu scolded. She was just about to pinch Ling Han, yet she realized that he had already collapsed into her lap and fallen into a deep slumber. Her tender feelings were instantly stirred, and she bent down to embrace him. This man had stood up in order to protect her. If he hadn't, none of these troubles would have ever arisen. She couldn't help but smile sweetly. She had met a man who was willing to sacrifice himself for her. What more could she ask for? She embraced Ling Han and let his head rest in her soft bosom so that he could get as good a rest as possible. However, she still couldn't understand why the Empress had suddenly let them go, especially since she had already developed such an intense killing intent toward them. What worldly matter could still strike fear in the Empress' mind? There was definitely none. However, she quickly pushed these thoughts to the back of her mind. She simply gazed at Ling Han with a loving expression, a sweet feeling permeating her heart. Chapter 11:11, Seeing Another Tower. After heavens knew how long, Shui Yanyu realized that Ling Han had already opened his eyes, and was now gazing at her. She suddenly became embarrassed, and she was just about to let go of him. However, she suddenly felt Ling Han's arms wrap around her waist. "Wife, let me lie here for a little longer," Ling Han said in a muffled voice, his head buried in her bosom. Shui Yanyu was both happy and embarrassed. However, her embarrassment still caused her to chide, "You're already so old, why are you still acting so spoiled?" Ling Han laughed loudly and nibbled at her breast. Only then did he stand up and say, "I feel so much better after having a nap." Although his vitality hadn't recovered fully yet, it was not far from doing so. Shui Yanyu rolled her eyes at him. This man had truly become addicted to performing perverted acts on her. He really couldn't control himself. The Azura Demon Emperor had already returned, but he obediently stayed in the distance, not daring to take a peep. Ling Han randomly ate some ginseng, Ganoderma, and other medicines. When he finished, he said, "Let's continue. Don't you need to rest for a little longer?" Shui Yanyu was still worried about Ling Han. His blood had just been sucked dry, after all, and it was difficult for him to recover even with his freakish recovery ability. "I'm fine." Ling Han cracked a smile. Then he scratched his head, and said, "However, what should I do if I come across the Empress again?" He had only spoken confidently before because he hadn't realized that he had grabbed Empress Luan Xing's breasts yet. However, if they met again in the future, he definitely wouldn't be able to resist looking at Empress Luan Xing's chest and recalling the feeling of grabbing it. Empress Luan Xing would probably go crazy if she saw this. Sigh, whatever. Shui Yanyu shook her head, and said, "If word of this gets out, I'm confident that you'll even be hunted by the Eternity Sky Emperor and the Jade Drop Emperor. Two supreme rulers hunting a mountain river tier cultivator." This sounded funny, yet there was a genuine possibility that it could happen. Who didn't know that these two emperors loved and admired Empress Luan Xing? They had even indicated that they were willing to give her their respective majestic empires as dowry if she were willing to marry them. And now, the goddess in their hearts had been indecently assaulted by another man. How could they not sentence him to death? Ling Han counted using his fingers. With a chuckle, he said, "How many heavenly body tier elites have I offended now?" Shui Yanyu could only roll her eyes at him. Perhaps Ling Han was the only mountain river tier cultivator in the world who could attract the attention of so many heavenly body tier elites. This left her both speechless and in admiration. Which other mountain river tier cultivator could achieve this? Even Sun Moon tier elites didn't have the right to be remembered by so many heavenly body tier elites, much less a small mountain river tier cultivator. The two of them continued forward. After experiencing this life and death situation together, the feelings between them naturally became even stronger. They occasionally exchanged a sweet and loving glance. Thus, they didn't feel bored as they walked, as their hearts would be filled with warmth whenever they glanced at their lover. Just like before, they sent the Azura Demon Emperor to fight those they could defeat. If they came across an opponent that they couldn't, they would avoid them or go into hiding for a while. Although the giant fish here were powerful, they didn't possess intelligence, as they were unable to cultivate. Thus, it didn't matter even if they discovered the secret of the Black Tower. A dozen or so days passed, and a tower appeared in their sights. It was a golden tower with 9 levels, yet its height was such that it towered above the surface of the sea. It was extremely magnificent. There were people entering the bottom level, yet there were also those who tried to enter the second and third levels. However, these people were all blasted back by a bolt of lightning when they neared the tower. Some were killed, while others were severely wounded. It was evident that those who weren't strong enough couldn't enter from the higher levels of the tower. They could only enter from the bottom level. "Let's check it out," Ling Han said. The two people and one puppet walked over. The entrance on the bottom level of the tower was insanely big, with a height of 300 meters and a width of around 150 meters. It was large enough for several hundred people to enter at the same time. Ling Han walked in, and the Azura Demon Emperor transformed into a small orb that was put away by Ling Han. This was to prevent him from having his identity exposed. His behavior didn't conform to that of a puppet, after all. "Brother Ling!" He heard someone shout at him. Ling Han turned around, only to see that Xiaofan, Duan, and the others had already arrived. Of course, the hateful Wuque was also present. Apart from these four young king-tier cultivators, there were also another 3 people present. Their auras were just as powerful. Come, let's introduce each other," Duan said with a smile. He pointed at Ling Han, and said, "This is Ling Han, Brother Ling, the only person who was able to pass the stone statue formation." Upon hearing this, a stunned expression appeared on the 3 people's faces. They couldn't help but stare at Ling Han. They hadn't challenged the stone statue formation, as they had been traveling with the seniors from their clans before. They had indeed come across a stone statue formation. However, it had been either at the Sun-Moon tier or at the Heavenly Body tier. They hadn't even had the chance to challenge them. However, this didn't stop them from being aware of the terrifying nature of the stone statue formation. From what they knew, no one had been able to pass. Even the older generation of Heavenly Body tier elites had been defeated in the 6th and 7th stages. According to those elite speculations, if one wanted to pass the stone statue formation, they had not only to reach the pinnacle of a major tier, but also to have a battle prowess that surpassed at least 9 stars. Was this possible? However, there was an example of success right before their very eyes. How could they not be stunned and surprised? If it weren't Duan who had told them, they would have treated such claims as utter nonsense. "Ling Han, these 3 are Quan Lishuan, Luo Jingren, and Guan Rong. We'll probably meet again soon at the Majestic Heaven sect. At that time, we'll be fellow apprentice brothers and sisters." Ling Han nodded, then clasped his hands, and said respectfully, "Greetings, everyone." The 3 people didn't dare to show any disrespect. Judging by Ling Han's prodigious talent, his background was most likely no weaker than theirs. Thus, they were all extremely respectful toward him. Meanwhile, Wuque sneered in disdain. He felt that Ling Han looked even more detestable now. Being as smart as Quan Lishuan and the other 2 were, they instantly understood that there was animosity between Ling Han and Wuque. However, their backgrounds were no weaker than that of Wuque, and thus they naturally didn't need to distance themselves from Ling Han out of fear of Wuque. "You guys arrived first, so did you figure out what's up with this tower?" Ling Han asked. Brother Ling came just in time. We just happen to be forming a team now," Su Jing said with a smile. Meanwhile, Xiaofan started to explain the situation, saying, "People need to form teams of 10 in order to enter this tower. Moreover, all team members need to have the same cultivation level 1. Also, the entire team will be eliminated once any single member of the team fails. Not only that, but there's only one opportunity as well." Ling Han nodded in understanding. No wonder these prodigies were all waiting here. They wanted to ensure that they succeeded. One prodigy mightn't necessarily be strong enough to carry 9 weaker team members. This wouldn't matter if they could start again after failing. After all, they could gain experience from their failure. However, this tower only gave people one chance to enter. They would be barred from entering again if they failed the first time. Thus, it was no surprise that everyone was especially careful. What do we get for passing the trial of this tower? Ling Han asked. Wuque sneered again. What a sordid person who only thinks of benefits and whatnot. Don't you think that the goal of supreme prodigies is to complete feats that others cannot? No idea, Xiao Sisi said with a shake of her head. Those who failed have already come out. They can stay here to observe, but they can't form another team to try again. There are also some people who haven't reappeared yet. Perhaps they've entered the 2nd, 3rd, or even 9th level. Ling Han smiled, and said, then what are we waiting for? Let's go. Chapter 11-12, Shadow. Xiao Sisi, Wuque, and the 5 other people could all be regarded as some of the most powerful cultivators of this galaxy's younger generation. If the 7 of them teamed up, 3 of them would be enough. They would be able to look after 2 people each, yet they would still have quite a good chance of carrying their remaining team members through the tower. The trial in this tower was probably similar to the trial of the stone statue formation. Those at the mountain river tier definitely wouldn't come across dangers at the sun-moon tier. Otherwise, that would be an execution, not a trial. To them, bringing 2 people each wouldn't pose a problem. The reason for their gathering was in order to get to know each other. After all, they were all destined to enter the majestic heaven sect. At that time, the advantage of their backgrounds would drop significantly. Thus, it was advantageous for them to acquaint themselves with more prodigies. Let's go. With the addition of Ling Han and Shui Yanyuan counting the spear-wielding man in as well, their team had already reached 10 members. Right now, they were standing before an eerily dark entrance. This was the entrance of the bottom level. If a team didn't have 10 members, they would be blocked at this entrance. They entered the bottom level together. Their surroundings instantly changed. They were in a spacious hall that had gigantic and towering columns. Unlike the entrance, this hall wasn't dark. This was because the columns were radiating with light. Master, little Azura can't move, the Azura Demon Emperor suddenly exclaimed. Little Azura's been trapped in this puppet, and I can't even move a finger. Ling Han nodded in his mind. Sure enough, there was a limit of 10 people per team. Moreover, there was a limit on their cultivation level as well. Thus, he naturally couldn't use puppets. Otherwise, it would be far too unfair. He retrieved his Vajra seal and Lion seal, and sure enough, these 2 divine seals had also become dull and lifeless. It was clear that they couldn't be used. By the looks of it, it was impossible to use items above the mountain river tier in this tower, regardless of whether they were god tools or divine seals. Ling Han was slightly puzzled. If this tower was a spirit tool, then its tool spirit was far too intelligent. Detestable fake. Small tower grumbled in displeasure. It was extremely proud, and it couldn't accept other tower-shaped god tools. Be careful, everyone. Duan warned. Although there were 8 supreme prodigies here, they still had 2 items of baggage, after all. If either of these 2 people were defeated, the entire team would suffer. Are there any dangers here? Wuque unleashed a burst of origin power that surged out like a water ripple. This burst of origin power didn't possess any offensive ability, and was merely a way to probe the surroundings. This place restricted one's divine sense, after all. However, one could still probe distant locations if they used their origin power as a feeler. A serious expression appeared on his face. He pointed at a corner, and said, "There's something there." The 10 of them walked over together. When they arrived near the corner, the first thing that they saw was a pool of blood. Then, they saw a corpse that had been ripped into 6 pieces. By the looks of the corpse, this person was probably attacked by a large demonic beast, Duan said as he collected a drop of blood to examine. Their resistance had been futile when they were struck by a claw, and their body was instantly ripped into pieces. The time of their death was under 30 minutes ago. Which means this person entered with a team just then, Xiaofan said as she nodded. A solemn expression appeared on their faces. A danger that was unknown was the greatest danger. We won't pass if we just stand here. Let's keep going. They continued to walk forward. Everyone still talked in the beginning as they had just met each other. However, their shallow relationships also meant that there was little for them to talk about, and they quickly ran out of topics. They eventually fell silent, and all that could be heard was the soft sound of their steps. The light radiating from the columns shone onto their bodies, creating long and drawn-out shadows that moved as they walked. Ling Han was bored, and he started counting the shadows on the ground to pass time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 11. Hang on. He faltered for a moment before the astonishment suddenly hit him. Why are there 11 shadows? There are clearly only 10 of us. The 11th shadow signifies that someone joined our group without our detection. This realization made his head go numb with apprehension. 8 members of their team were supreme prodigies, yet none of them had detected this uninvited guest. Ling Han had only noticed because he had been counting their shadows out of boredom. Stop for a moment, he said. Everyone stopped where they were. However, they were all feeling a little confused. They had been walking smoothly, so why had Ling Han suddenly called for them to stop? What's wrong? Wuque asked impatiently. In reality, he didn't want to be in the same team as Ling Han. Although Shui Yanyu was also brought closer to him as a result, there was a person that he detested between the two of them. Thus, it was pointless even if she was here. Ling Han waved his hand dismissively. If it weren't for the fact that only teams of 10 could pass, he definitely wouldn't bother with this person at all. He swept his gaze around, and his expression changed drastically. What's wrong? Shui Yanyu hurriedly asked. There are only 10 people here. Ling Han stammered with some difficulty. Brother Ling, are you a little too tense? Quan Lishuan said with a chuckle. He had spoken politely in order to give Ling Han some face. If it had been someone else, he would have immediately scolded them. What was there to be astonished about? If there weren't 10 people, would there perhaps be 9 people? Or would 11 make you happier? Right now, he had genuinely become suspicious. Could someone like this pass the stone statue formation? Strange. Ling Han looked at the ground again, and his expression changed even more. Guys, count the number of shadows on the floor. Ling Han, have you had enough yet? Wuque roared. He had already been displeased with Ling Han to begin with, and thus he was naturally even more ticked off now. The others remained silent, yet their expressions had already exposed their thoughts. Hang on. Xiaofan's expression also changed drastically, and she said, look at the shadows on the ground. The others finally looked at the ground after hearing her repeat Ling Han's words. Their expressions also changed drastically. There were 11 shadows. How was this possible? There were clearly 10 of them, so how could there be an 11th shadow? They had to be seeing things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the others all started to count the number of team members. However, there were only 10 of them no matter how they counted. Meanwhile, there were 11 shadows on the ground. Ling Han composed himself, and said, everyone, move. The others nodded and raised their arm. The shadows on the ground also mimicked their actions. The problem was, all 11 shadows did the same. Do it one by one. Ling Han raised his arm first, and only one of the shadows mimicked his action. The others raised their arm one after another. The second person, third, fourth, fifth, 8th, 9th, 10th. Shua. Everyone looked toward the shadow that hadn't moved from beginning to end. Die. Ling Han unsheathed his divine demon sword and activated it with his origin power. Wisps of auras flowed down, each of them as heavy as a mountain. At the same time, flames surged into the air and transformed into a firebird. These were the divine patterns of gravity and divine patterns of flames that Ling Han possessed. He had inscribed them into his divine demon sword, and at this moment, he had activated both of them together. Boom! Sword light flashed about like a rain of arrows. Everyone instantly looked over, only to see that the number of shadows on the ground had already become 10 again. That mysterious shadow had disappeared, and they couldn't find it anywhere. Chapter 11-13, Ghostly Shadow. Although they were all prodigies, they couldn't help but feel their heads go numb with fear and their hearts beat in intense palpitation. A shadow had suddenly disappeared before their very eyes. They had all been staring at it intently, yet their attacks had created a large and instantaneous fluctuation. This affected their senses slightly, creating a minuscule time gap during which the shadow suddenly disappeared. "It's all your fault," Wuque shouted, his finger pointed at Ling Han. There was a look of blame on his face, and he said, "If you hadn't tried to play the hero and attacked, we wouldn't have lost sight of that mysterious shadow." He had been displeased with Ling Han to begin with, and he was simply finding an excuse to criticize him now. Shui Yanyu flared up in anger, and said indignantly, "If it hadn't been for Ling Han's warning, you wouldn't have even known that there was a shadow stalking us." Wuque was a prodigy, after all, and he already knew that he had no chance of getting together with Shui Yanyu. Thus, he naturally severed his feelings of love and admiration of her. As a member of the team, one naturally has to act in the best interests of the team, Wuque said with a humph. However, this person is completely full of himself. Who here doesn't have a more powerful offensive ability than him? Was there a need for him to attack? Now we've let that mysterious shadow escape. Ling Han was also ticked off, and he said, "I'll beat the hell out of you when we get out." Wuque chuckled coldly. When they got out, the only person getting beaten would be Ling Hanenli. His physique and recovery ability were powerful, so weren't these to prepare him for a good beating? "I'll be waiting," he replied. "Hehe, let's concentrate on how to find that shadow first," Luo Jingren said. He walked over to defuse the situation. This had nothing to do with him, but they were all team members now, so any incidents would end up affecting the entire team. Su Jing pondered for a moment, and asked, "Have you guys heard of any existence that has no physical body and only a shadow?" Everyone shook their heads. Such a being seemed far too eerie and sinister. "Let's just forget about this for the moment. Our aim is just to make it through this place. When we're close to succeeding, that mysterious shadow will definitely reappear to attack us," Duan said. Everyone agreed with Duan's suggestion. If the aim of that mysterious shadow was to obstruct them from passing this tower, it would definitely reappear to attack them. If not, then they wouldn't need to worry about it anyway. In any case, their priority was to make it through this place. They started to advance forward again. This time, however, everyone kept their eyes on the shadows that were flittering about on the ground. The only light source here was the columns, and because of this, their shadows would change every time they passed by a column. After some time, the number of shadows on the ground suddenly changed again. The 10 people instantly stopped in their tracks. This was just as they expected. The number of shadows on the ground had increased again. Moreover, there were 12, not 11, shadows. Fuck. The ghost shadow has friends? Shui Yanyu involuntarily shuffled closer to Ling Han. She was a female, and thus she was inherently afraid of such kinds of unknown. In any case, her lover was by her side, and this caused her to unknowingly become reliant upon him. None of them acted rashly. This was because they hadn't determined which 2 shadows were the ghost shadows yet. Spread apart. Everyone distanced themselves from each other. Now that they were spread apart, the 2 shadows couldn't hide in the group of shadows anymore. Instead, they would stick out like sore thumbs. Die. The 10 of them attacked in unison, all of them unleashing their full strength. Pung! It's there. Ling Han activated his Eye of Truth and locked onto a shadow. He then sprinted after it in pursuit. This ghostly shadow had an agile transformation ability. It had still been as large as their shadows just a moment ago, yet now that it was fleeing, it had transformed into a tiny black dot. It was so tiny that it was barely noticeable. It was no wonder that they had let it escape before. Lin Han stabbed with his sword, and the divine demon sword instantly transformed into a streak of light. He had already activated the fast technique, and this made his divine demon sword travel at a speed so fast that it was indescribable. Pooh! The tip of his sword struck the tiny black dot, and it surprisingly felt as if he had struck a physical body. Ling Han shook his sword, causing tremendous power to surge through it and obliterate the tiny black dot. Countless wisps of black aura instantly rose into the air. In fact, there were even shrill and ear-piercing screeches traveling out from the auras. No, these weren't sounds, but divine sense. They traveled into Ling Han's mind and sought to plant conflict within him. Humph! Trying to destabilize my divine sense? This was a joke. If one wanted to affect Ling Han's divine sense, they needed to be many cultivation levels above him. Even those at the consummate level of the mountain river tier wouldn't be able to inflict damage to Ling Han's divine sense. Under the tempering of the indestructible heaven scroll, his divine sense had already become incredibly tough. Like floodwater meeting a dam, the ear-piercing screeches were instantly reflected back. A look of surprise appeared on Ling Han's face. This kind of attacker, this type of form, to be more precise, appeared especially familiar to him. Shwa! The wisps of black aura regathered to form a shadow again. Then, the shadow ferociously lashed out with its arms. Chong, chong, chong. Like saber blades, 5 razor-sharp claws sprung out from its hand. Humph! Paltry tricks. Guan Rong just happened to be beside Ling Han, and he naturally wasn't willing to let Ling Han steal all the thunder. He immediately swung a fist toward the shadow. There were a whopping 60 divine patterns on his fist, and this caused his arm to become like an unparalleled god tool. Pung! His fist collided with the ghostly shadow's claws. The divine patterns on his fist lit up, and the strike from the ghostly shadow was instantly blocked. In fact, the ghostly shadow was even sent flying by his strike. It was clear that the ghostly shadow was no match for Guan Rong, both in terms of power and in terms of battle prowess. Guan Rong's strike had been effective, and this caused his confidence to shoot through the roof. The unknown was the most terrifying. Now that this ghostly shadow had displayed strength that was at the high extreme of the mountain river tier at most, it merely appeared strange. As such, Guan Rong naturally didn't need to be overly cautious anymore. However, similar to Ling Han, this ghostly shadow also possessed an astonishing recovery ability. Black aura whirled about, and it instantly recovered its original form. Then, it immediately lashed out with its claws again. Its body flashed about as a cold glint reflected off its claws, and it appeared much like a god of death. At this moment, everyone finally understood that the corpses from before hadn't been ripped apart by demonic beasts. Rather, they had been ripped apart by this ghostly shadow. It could slice people into 6 pieces with a single strike, and added to the fact that it had a potentially undying body, it definitely couldn't be underestimated. Ling Han followed up Guan Rong's strike by unleashing his 7-kill subduing soul technique. Ah! An agonized wail instantly traveled into everyone's mind. This was the howl of the ghostly shadow. The ghostly shadow couldn't maintain its original shape anymore, and it continually shifted into different forms. It transformed into a human figure for a while, then into a beast figure, then into a fish figure, and then into a bird figure. In the end, it became a mess of shapes. It appeared as if it were on the brink of collapse. As expected, Ling Han nodded in his mind. This ghostly appeared to be unafraid of physical attacks, and it had been able to immediately recover after being smashed apart. However, it was extremely vulnerable against divine sense attacks. Guan Rong laughed heartily, and said, "So it turns out that it was afraid of divine sense attacks. Humph. Witness the power of my spirit-refining swords." Wuque shook his arms, and countless golden swords flew out from his eyes. These weren't physical, but instead formed from his divine sense. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Tens of thousands of swords surged outward, and the other ghostly shadow was naturally unable to escape. It was pinned to a column by the golden swords. It shrieked in agony, and its figure transformed rapidly. It twisted about for a moment, and then eventually vanished into nothingness. Chapter 11-14, Shadow-Eating Tribe. Wuque couldn't help but smile smugly. He and Ling Han had both unleashed divine sense attacks, yet he had been able to insta-kill the shadow, while Ling Han had only managed to severely wound it. This showed the gap in strength between their divine senses. Ling Han glanced at him, and a sense of scorn involuntarily formed in his mind. He hadn't used his full strength while unleashing the 7-kill subduing soul technique just then, as he had wanted to gauge how strong ghostly shadows were. Thus, he naturally had to raise the power of the 7-kill subduing soul technique bit by bit. In Wuque's eyes, however, this was a display of Ling Han's weakness. Ling Han didn't want to argue with him. When their team dissolved after they left this place, he would definitely beat this person up. He would let Wuque know that he had merely been embarrassing himself by bragging so shamelessly. "What's this?" Xiao Cici asked. She was a beautiful woman, and thus she didn't mind appearing a little clueless. After all, this wouldn't cause the others to look down on her. On the contrary, men weren't inclined to ask questions even if they didn't understand something. This was especially so if one were among a group of prodigies. Who didn't want face? Everyone remained silent. This was because none of them knew what this was. Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, "Perhaps this isn't a being from the immortal realm." "What?" the others all shouted in surprise. What could it be if it wasn't a being from the immortal realm? "Ling Han, stop trying to frighten everyone," Wuque scolded. Ling Han couldn't even be bothered to look at him. "If I'm not wrong, this is probably a being from the netherworld." This ghostly shadow reminded him of the Azura demon emperor. Neither of them had a physical body, and both of them possessed the ability to attack using their divine sense. In addition, their divine sense was both weak. It was just that this ghostly shadow didn't appear to possess sentience, and it merely knew how to launch some attacks in a mechanical manner. Otherwise, if this shadow were the as powerful Azura demon emperor, how could it charge over to hand them its life on a silver platter? The netherworld. A solemn expression appeared on the prodigies' faces. They were very fortunate that the barrier between the two realms was extremely secure in this galaxy. As a result, they didn't need to fight off any invasions from the netherworld. They had merely heard of the netherworld's existence. Meanwhile, the Venerable Trinity was someone who had returned from the two-realm battlefield. Even a powerful person like him hadn't been able to exterminate the intruders from the netherworld. From this, it could be seen just how powerful the netherworld was. "Brother Ling, are you sure?" Su Jing asked with a serious expression. If a being from the netherworld had truly appeared here, this would be a tremendous problem. Although the ghostly shadow had been weak, it would be extremely likely that there were more powerful beings from the netherworld lurking around. This meant that there was a possibility of a two-realm passageway existing in their galaxy. If that were the case, they would need to battle. They would need to engage in a battle of immense proportions. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "I'm only guessing as well. Moreover, even if this being is genuinely from the netherworld, that doesn't imply that there must be a two-realm passageway in our galaxy. Perhaps the owner of this tomb brought it over from some other place. This was extremely likely. Ling Han had witnessed the extreme narcissism of the tomb owner, who had replicated a stone statue formation after passing through a similar one in some puppet sect. With that in mind, it wouldn't be surprising if the tomb owner had killed many elites of the netherworld in the two-realm battlefield and also captured some to bring over here to show off his might and greatness. It was just that the tomb owner should have been dead for countless years already. Even if he had truly captured beings from the netherworld and brought them over, could they really have survived for this long? Ling Han shook his head. He couldn't make heads nor tails of the situation, at least not now. There was no need for him to waste any more time on this. The ghostly shadow had been a little muddle-headed, and it clearly didn't possess any intelligence. This was evident from how it had been tailing Ling Han and the others just then. That had been an extremely childish act. Thus, they naturally wouldn't be able to get any answers from the ghostly shadows themselves. That being the case, they immediately launched divine sense attacks to exterminate the remaining ghostly shadows. These beings were especially strange, and after they were killed, they transformed into mist that would eventually dissipate. They didn't leave any corpse. Ling Han used his divine sense to communicate with the Azura Demon Emperor and ask him questions. He was a genuine native of the netherworld. After listening to Ling Han's account, the Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly replied, "According to Master's description, I'm 90% certain that those were beings from the netherworld. They're called the Shadow-Eating Tribe." Shadow-Eating Tribe? Ling Han asked in surprise. "That's right, these beings feed on shadows," the Azura Demon Emperor said. "Moreover, they can absorb someone's life essence by swallowing their shadow. They're formless killers. However, the ghostly shadows that Master spoke of are clearly a bit strange. It appears as if they've lost their sentience and awareness. They simply attached themselves to others' shadows by instinct, and they didn't cause any tangible damage." Ling Han nodded in agreement. Those shadows were most likely members of the Shadow-Eating Tribe. However, their awareness had already been severed by the tomb owner, and thus they even lost their ability to feed. They were simply left with an instinctive hobby of following shadows. "Let's continue," Quan Lishuan said in a haughty voice. "Who cares if those ghostly shadows are from the netherworld or not? They're fairly weak anyway, and we can deal with them in no time at all." Indeed, divine sense attacks were extremely effective and damaging toward ordinary living beings. Quan Lishuan and the others were all descendants of super-powerful forces, so it was only natural that they all possessed secret techniques to cultivate their divine sense. Thus, not only did they possess a powerful divine sense, but they also possessed the ability to launch divine sense attacks. As such, they held no fear of the ghostly shadows that roamed this place. They set off again, and after a short while, the shadows on the ground increased again. They were prepared this time, so they weren't afraid in the least. They attacked together and obliterated all of the ghostly shadows. In fact, it wasn't only divine sense attacks that could wound these ghostly shadows. Flames, lightning, and other attack methods could also threaten the lives of these shadows. It was just that they weren't as effective as divine sense attacks. Meanwhile, these ghostly shadows were least afraid of direct physical attacks. A clear example of this was the Azura Demon Emperor, who had still managed to live for 100,000 years even though he had been separated into 9 pieces. So this level is actually this easy to pass. After walking for a while, they arrived before a giant metal door. It was extremely likely that this signified the end of the first level. Everyone wore a faint smile. To ordinary mountain river tier cultivators, this level wouldn't be easy to pass. This was because the ghostly shadows came and went without a sound. Moreover, apart from the descendants of super-powerful forces, how many people practiced secret techniques pertaining to divine sense attacks? Thus, if it were some other team, this level would definitely be incredibly challenging to pass. Hold on. Only upon arriving closer did they discover that there was a gigantic demonic beast lying before the giant metal door. They had failed to see it before as the color of its scales was far too similar to that of the tiles on the floor. This demonic beast. It was extremely difficult to describe its appearance. This was because it was lying on the floor at the moment, and this made it look like a flat piece of rug. Is this demonic beast guarding the door? It looks like we have to defeat it. Let's probe its strength first. Xiaofan smiled faintly, and said, I'll try first. She retrieved a set of bow and arrows. The bow was decorated with several divine patterns, and the arrows were too. This was a set of god tools. So it turns out that Lady Xiao is also an expert in archery, the others praised. They were also a little fearful at the same time. Experts in archery could launch attacks from incredibly long distances, and it was mighty difficult to defend against such attacks. I only know a bit about archery, Xiaofan said modestly. She drew her bow. Wang. The divine patterns on the bow and arrow lit up, exuding a domineering aura. Everyone's heart shuddered. The might of this arrow couldn't be underestimated. Even they would have to be especially careful if they came up against such an attack. If they were caught off guard, it was extremely likely that they would be hit by this attack. Chapter 11:15, The Tiger That Guards the Door. Xiao, the sharp arrow shot out. This arrow was incredibly fast, turning into a streak of light that rapidly shot towards that strange demonic beast. Ling Han nodded internally. This shot might not be as powerful as the annihilating dragon star arrow, but the gap wasn't very large. However, if he shot the annihilating dragon star arrow with this bow and arrow, the might would definitely be even stronger. If he shot out the ultimate arrow, it would be even more so. Ding! The arrow arrived, releasing a series of fiery sparks, and then bounced back. The demonic beast seemed to have been startled awake, and suddenly stood up. It was like someone suddenly grabbing a rug in the middle part, and then picked it up, making for a very bizarre sight. But in the process of rising, the form of this demonic beast was also changing. It actually turned from a thin rug into a fierce tiger. It was 30 meters long and 15 meters tall. It was completely crimson, and the fur on its neck seemed to be burning, displaying its awe-inspiring presence. Everyone watched this with shock, not because of the appearance of the demonic beast, but rather because this shot from Xiaofan had actually not had the slightest effect. This was extremely astonishing. The abilities of demonic beasts are beyond our expectations. What should we do? Force our way in? How about we first have a few of us draw this demonic beast away, then open the large doors, and we go together afterwards? This is not a bad idea. It is obviously meaningless to continue wasting our time here. Everyone nodded. After a discussion, they decided to have Duan, Quan Lishuan, and Su Jing draw the demonic beast away, whereas the remaining number would be responsible for opening the doors. They were all geniuses of the present era. Since they had already laid out a plan, they would naturally proceed according to their plan to the letter, not hesitating in the slightest. Ugly, come chase us. The trio began to provoke it, but that demonic beast merely lay there lazily, ignoring them completely. Just like it had not pursued them when it had been shot earlier, it was so lazy that it practically raised their hackles in anger. Duan and his group quickly made their moves, blasting out stream after stream of origin power towards that demonic beast. At first, the demonic beast was too lazy to care, but when it had been hit many times, it finally lost its patience. With a roar, it charged towards the three of them. This pounce was extraordinarily fast. Duan and his group fled in different directions, using the terrain in this place to play a game of hide and seek with this demonic beast. Ling Han and the others rushed out too, and began to barrage the doors. Pang! 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 Large bangs sounded out continuously, but what shocked them was that these doors were so sturdy they seemed unbreakable. Everyone used their respective ultimate moves, but no matter how powerful their attacks were, even normal cultivators at the peak stage of the consummate level of Mountain River tier would be insta-killed. Were completely useless against these big doors. We can't open it at all. They had no choice but to admit that in the face of these doors, their power was just like an ant trying to shake a tree, unable to move the ladder in the slightest. Xiaofan, who was a careful person, suddenly pointed at that demonic beast as she exclaimed, "Look at the neck of that tiger." Everyone turned their heads and saw that there actually seemed to be a key hanging around the neck of that demonic beast. "Looks like we must defeat this fierce tiger, and take that key to open these doors. We cannot use shortcuts. Then, let us call Brother Du and the others back, and battle with our full effort." All of them were heroic characters. Previously, they'd chosen to draw the tiger away only because they had not wanted to waste their time, but now that their only option was to battle, they feared nothing. Shui Yanyu and the spear-wielding man stepped back to one side. In this kind of battle, they could not possibly interfere, or it would be merely seeking their own deaths. That was because this demonic tiger was very powerful. If that had not been the case, Duan and the others would not have needed to draw it away, and would have only had to trap it on one side. They sent out a signal for Duan and the others to return. Duan and his group all circled back, and when they saw that the big doors were still tightly locked, they couldn't help but be curious. "There is no need to ask. We can't open these doors at all, we need the key hanging on the neck of that demonic beast," Guan Rong explained. Then we just have to fight." Duan and his group were also not the slightest bit afraid. The 8 great prodigies stood together to receive the demonic tiger that was racing back towards them. The strength of this demonic tiger was a little inconceivable. There were actually as many as 80 divine patterns on its body. What kind of concept was this? It was equivalent to an 8-star genius. Furthermore, as it was at the peak stage of the consummate level of Mountain River tier in the first place, added with the power of 8 stars, it was so incredibly powerful that none would dare to befriend it. No wonder there was a need for 10 to form a team. Though Ling Han and the others were all prodigies among prodigies, fighting this demonic beast, they would only be defeated. Theoretically, the number of 10 would be able to compensate for the gap of a single star in battle prowess. After all, these prodigies had not yet formed their 5th Mountain River, so against this demonic beast, they were practically at a loss for what to do. Come on. All 8 were confident. Aside from Ling Han, the other 6 had reached the peak stage of the consummate level of Mountain River tier, their power reaching as high as 6 stars, and added with the secret techniques they knew, their battle prowess was at least 7 stars. The battle prowess they showed when using their ultimate moves would definitely be capable of reaching 8 stars. Hence, there was still quite a high chance that they would win the battle. "I'll focus on the front," Ling Han said. This gained the complete agreement of Xiaofan, Su Jing and Duan. Though Wuque was very displeased, he did not object. They all knew that the toughness of Ling Han's physique was far superior to theirs, so he was the best choice to be the main assault on the front. Quan Lishuan and the others, meanwhile, had never witnessed Ling Han's defenses, and were slightly surprised. A cultivator in the high extreme of Mountain River tier was going to take the front? But even Wuque had not objected, so they naturally could only choose to trust him. Ling Han drew out the divine demon sword, and after awakening its power, immediately charged towards the demonic tiger. Pang! The demonic tiger waved a paw, and suddenly slapped down on Ling Han. Its power was too strong, almost reaching the true apex of Mountain River tier. Ling Han was completely unqualified to stand strong against an attack of this strength. Wah! He spat out a mouthful of blood, and couldn't help but be depressed. Previously, he had been sucked dry by Empress Xing. He had just recovered a little with much difficulty. Now, he was forced to throw up blood from an attack. Did the world have some kind of grudge against him? This attack caused a few of his bones to be dislocated, but Ling Han's origin power merely trembled, and his bones naturally went back to their appropriate positions. He bounced off his feet, and once again charged over. Using the fast technique, his offensive was like a wave. Quan Lishuan and the others watched on, dumbfounded. Being smacked with such powerful strength, Wuque came off unscathed. What kind of freak were you? However, though Ling Han's physique was freakish, that demonic beast was no ordinary character either. Under Ling Han's multiple slashes and attacks, it also appeared to be similarly unharmed as if it was indestructible like diamond. This was really inconceivable. Previously, it had transformed into a rug, being extremely soft, but now, it seemed to be like high-grade godly metal, being incredibly hard. How could these two completely opposing traits possibly appear on the same body? The demonic beast pounced, its battle prowess powerful, appearing to be almighty. Ling Han restrained it up front, and the 7 of them attacked with their full effort. However, every attack was a waste of energy. The freakishly high defenses of this demonic tiger had even surpassed Ling Han's. This is definitely not a demonic beast, but rather a puppet. Ling Han concluded. He had possessed such a physique only through cultivating the indestructible Heaven Scroll, so how could it be matched by any random creature that crossed their path? However, if this demonic beast was really a puppet built from godly metal, it would be understandable. One would only need to use level 5 godly metal to build this puppet, and the defenses were naturally not something that could be resolved by Mountain River tier. This would also explain why its strength was so powerful. Chapter 11:16, Want a reward? It should be a puppet. Otherwise, one would have needed to form the 5th Mountain River to reach 8 stars of power. If it had really formed the 5th Mountain River, I do not believe such a being would agree to being a guard of the door here. But if it really is a puppet, what do we do? Puppets had no vital points, knew no pain, and aside from the fact that their brains were a little dumb, they were practically a perfect fighting machine, and there was no way around them. They had more or less confirmed this. This demonic tiger's defenses had surpassed the limits of Mountain River tier, and it was already invincible by nature, so how were they supposed to defeat it? Ling Han pondered for a moment, and then answered, there are 2 possibilities. Firstly, there is a limit to the amount of time a puppet can move. We would only need to persist for a certain amount of time, and it would naturally stop attacking. And secondly, we do not have to destroy the puppet, but merely take the key. The others nodded respectively. This could not possibly be irresolvable, or it would have lost the meaning of existence. Let's take the key. They immediately came to a decision. It was very simple. Even if this demonic tiger had a limit to the amount of time it could move, they did not know how long that period of time would be. Hence, it was naturally best for them to take the key, and this was also the crux of their problem. Brother Ling and I will be responsible for drawing the attention of this demonic tiger, and you guys take the chance to snatch the key, Xiaofan said. She once again drew out her bow and arrow, and aimed right at the eyes of the demonic tiger, shooting arrow after arrow. So rich. Usually, Ling Han could not bear to use the godly arrows he had obtained, because there were only so many of them. The moment he shot them out and did not manage to retrieve them, that would mean 1 less arrow in his possession. Xiaofan, on the other hand, continued to shoot arrow after arrow without stop, and she did not look like she had the slightest intention of retrieving them. He really had no idea exactly how many arrows she had actually brought. As expected of the Princess of the Thousand Frost majestic empire, rich and imposing. Ling Han sighed, and cheered himself up to continue to stand strong against this demonic tiger on the front line to gain time and create an opening for the others. Duan and the others, meanwhile, began attacking the collar that had the key hanging from it. After a few times, they looked immensely pleased because though the collar was also very sturdy, it was not unbreakable. With this, their confidence naturally increased greatly, and they were strongly on the offensive. After a few hundred attacks, the collar was finally broken. However, this was only a collar, and it was useless for them to just create a hole in it. It was still firmly hanging on the neck of this demonic tiger, so they had to create another hole on the other side. Only then would the collar finally drop. Fuck, can you guys get a move on? Ling Han gritted his teeth. He was enduring all the firepower from the demonic beast. Those were the attacks of a being at the peak stage of the consummate level with 8 stars of strength. That was practically about Sun-Moon tier level, and even if his physique was comparable to level 4 godly metal, he could not hold on much longer. If it were not for the effects of the indestructible heaven scroll, continuously healing his body, he would have been killed who knew how many times over. We're close. Even Xiao Sisi had joined the team that was attacking the collar. She shot out arrow after arrow, and they were all hitting the same place. Because none of them would dare fight this demonic tiger at close quarters, they could only shoot out sword rays, saber rays, fist rays, and other such long-distance attacks. Their power was naturally slightly weaker, which also caused severing the collar take a considerably long amount of time. After close to an hour had passed, a ding was heard. The collar had finally been broken in half, and while the upper half was still stuck on the neck of the demonic tiger, the lower half had already dropped down. And on it, the key was attached. Ling Han hurriedly retreated, creating some distance between himself and the demonic tiger, whereas the others took advantage of the opening to pick the key up and rushed towards those big doors. They pushed the key in, and after turning the key, the great doors slowly opened. Run! Ling Han called out at Shui Yenyu. It was necessary for all of them to pass through at this point, and even one less person would be considered as a failure. The 2 weaker ones of the bunch, Shui Yenyu and the spear-wielding man, left first, followed by Xiao Sisi and the others, whereas Ling Han tailed behind. He made use of the pillar and circled around it before turning right around to charge ahead of the demonic tiger, and leaped towards those big doors. Ong, the demonic tiger released a furious roar, and chased after him. Quick! Quick! At the entrance, Duan and the others were calling out anxiously. Even Xia Wuque and the spear-wielding man were no exceptions, and the demonic tiger was already approaching closer and closer behind him. Shua, the demonic tiger, shot out a paw, and smacked it out at Ling Han. If it landed a solid hit, Ling Han would definitely be sent veering away from his original course, and thus smash into the wall on the side instead of charging out the big doors. Humph! Ling Han drew out the ultimate arrow. Though he was wielding himself like a bow, the might released was still very frightening. Origin power condensed, and turned into a stream of light that shot out. Pooh! The arrow of origin power landed on the paw of the demonic tiger, but facing what possibly could be defenses comparable to level 5 godly metal, even the ultimate arrow could not penetrate it. However, this was an attack that had Ling Han's full power behind it. With the frighteningly powerful impact, the tiger's paw still veered off slightly. This paw missed Ling Han by a hair's breadth. And Ling Han shot out, flying out the huge doors. Pang, he fell onto the ground, feeling weak all over. He had no way of regulating the might of this ultimate arrow. The moment he used it, he would definitely expend all the energy in his body, not leaving the slightest drop behind. Thankfully, as his cultivation level increased, the rate at which he recovered his power was also extremely fast. It would only be a matter of a few hours for him to recover completely. The demonic tiger stopped at the entrance, and did not pursue them out. It was as if an invisible wall was stopping it from going further. It roared for a while, and they saw the great doors slowly close, placing it firmly on the outside. The 10 of them sighed in relief. They had finally forced their way in. However, had they actually passed the first stage, or was it one of the tests of the first stage? They turned around, and looked around carefully. This was another great hall, and was an incredibly large one. In the center, there was a stone tablet standing upright. "Congratulations for passing the first stage," a voice suddenly spoke from the stone tablet. Everyone experienced a shock. "Ho ho, don't be nervous. This is only a sliver of consciousness that I have left behind. As for the real me, I am not going to tell you," the stone tablet said. Merely a few words from it were enough to engender anyone's fury, making the 10 of them very much want to give it a good beating. Unfortunately, this was only a remaining sliver of consciousness, so how were they supposed to accomplish that? Ling Han was immediately sure that it must have been left behind by the owner of the tomb because it was extremely narcissistic and was practically asking to be beaten, having the same style as the message on the stone table that appeared when the stone statue formation concluded. However, this time, the tomb owner was playing a new trick, and actually left behind a sliver of divine sense to joke around. "Want a reward? If you do, beg me," the stone tablet continued. They all looked at one another. Was this really a great senior and ultimate elite? Why did he seem to be quite shameless? Passing the first stage should have a reward, right? Ling Han deduced. Since that is so, then no matter if we beg or not, we would still be able to obtain the reward. So why should we beg then? I'm about to die of fury. What harm would it do if you begged me a little? Would you die from it? The stone tablet abruptly cried out. Everyone decided to simply remain silent by now. This great elite and senior seemed to be out of touch completely. Fine then. Rules are rules. I shall give you a little reward, then. The stone tablet calmed down, and its tone was much calmer than before. Chapter 11-17, Pummeling Wuque. "Here, take it, brats," the stone tablet said. 10 jade vials materialized on the ground in a row. It was evident that there was 1 vial per person. This was a team victory, and thus everyone's reward was naturally the same. One wouldn't get a richer reward just because they contributed more to the victory. Everyone grabbed their vial of pills. However, Wuque had an advantage over everyone else. This was because the spear-wielding man was clearly his subordinate, meaning that he would have to give all of the benefits to Wuque. Ling Han grabbed a vial of pills and noticed that there was no label on the vial. He turned to the stone tablet and said, "May I ask what kind of pills these are?" "Purple Pattern Mountain River pills," the stone tablet answered. "What's that?" None of them had ever heard of this kind of pill before. After ingesting it, one's power will increase by 1 star for a period of 2 hours, the stone tablet explained. "It's that trashy?" Ling Han said in disappointment. Oi, you have to learn to be thankful after receiving something from others," the stone tablet said in displeasure. "Moreover, you guys have only passed the first level. Did you expect some extremely valuable reward? So you're saying that we can still receive more rewards after passing the second, third, and other levels?" Ling Han asked. "That's right, as long as you guys are powerful enough," the stone tablet replied. Their fighting spirits were instantly ignited. They weren't motivated by the rewards per se, but rather by their unyielding ambitions and confidence as prodigies to become number 1. "What are the remaining levels like?" Ling Han asked. "Why should I tell you?" the stone tablet countered. "If you want to know, then go and experience them for yourself. However, I can tell you this: the second level is a labyrinth, and only those who navigate out of it within 2 hours will receive a reward. There's no need to form a team for this level. In fact, forming teams is forbidden. You guys can set off now." The stone tablet fell silent after saying this. A set of stairs that led to the second level appeared before them. Let's go," Duan said with a smile. He was the first to walk toward the stairs. Ling Han didn't move. He found this situation to be particularly strange. This was a tomb, so why were there trials and challenges? Even if this old senior had left a wisp of his will, wouldn't it be better for him to guard his tomb? Why did he have to make it seem as if he were selecting disciples for a large sect? However, since there were rewards involved, Ling Han was still prepared to take part in these trials. There was nothing to lose, after all. Ling Han, didn't you want to fight me? Wuque said, his finger pointed at Ling Han. Come at me. Ling Han was naturally unafraid. I won't kill you, since we have fought side by side just then. However, I'll have you know that there are always those who are stronger and more talented than you. Don't be too full of yourself. Who would have thought that Wuque could utter such truthful words? Ling Han was slightly surprised. He had initially thought that Wuque was a petty and narrow-minded person. To his surprise, he was actually open-minded to a certain degree. He pondered for a moment before saying, I'll also spare your life since you were able to utter such words. I'll simply have you understand the meaning of what you just said. Huh, how arrogant. Wuque chuckled coldly, and said, let's fight. He roared softly, and over 60 divine patterns lit up on his hands. At the same time, 4 mountains and rivers materialized behind his back, each of them radiating with a terrifying aura. The fact that he possessed over 60 divine patterns signified that he had a power of 6 stars. You want to threaten me with such measly power? Ling Han said with a smile. It wasn't as if Wuque hadn't seen his defenses before. Although 6 stars above the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier was indeed powerful, it still wasn't enough to defeat Ling Han. Of course this isn't all. Wuque retrieved a black arm armor and wore it on his arm. He shook his arm, and the arm armor was instantly activated. The patterns that were carved into it lit up, and the number of divine patterns on his hand instantly increased dramatically. 71 divine patterns. This signified that his power had gone up another star. Ling Han was surprised, and he exclaimed, You didn't use this god tool when challenging the stone statue formation just then. It's not that I didn't want to use it. It's because this god tool is damaged and can only last for a quarter of an hour. Wuque didn't hide the truth from Ling Han. It would definitely take far longer than 15 minutes to pass the stone statue formation, and thus he would have only been able to advance a short distance had he used it at that time. It definitely wouldn't have helped him pass the formation. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, You're confident that you can defeat me within 15 minutes? It's more than enough. Wuque said proudly. Although Ling Han's defenses were astonishing, Wuque's power was already near the pseudo-sun-moon tier. After unleashing his secret techniques, it was even possible that he could kill Ling Han. Hee, I hope you can maintain your confidence, Ling Han said with a chuckle. He took out the lion's seal that he had received. This seal could be used a total of 10 times, though this upper limit might decrease depending on the period of time that it was activated during each use. His battle prowess was far weaker than that of Wuque's. This was inevitable due to the large gap in their cultivation level. If they fought without using external items, Ling Han would definitely be crushed. However, how could someone as proud as Ling Han accept the fate of being crushed? Thus, he resolutely decided to use the lion seal. He slapped the divine seal onto his body, and divine patterns instantly formed on his skin. At a rough glance, there were as many as 800 divine patterns. Pooh! Wuque immediately spluttered loudly, his face painted with shock. He only possessed a tad over 70 divine patterns, yet Ling Han possessed a whopping 800. How big a difference was this? This wasn't simply a case of being 10 times stronger, but rather a case of being one major tier plus dozens of minor levels stronger. Even though he was a prodigy, could he defeat someone at the Sun-Moon tier? In any case, Ling Han's power wasn't simply at the Sun-Moon tier, it was at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. I surrender, he said with a bitter expression. Ling Han flashed a smile, and said, do you think I'll stop just because you surrendered? I've already activated the lion seal, so how can I let you off like this? He charged over with his hands open, the divine patterns providing him with boundless power. Ling Han's power was already miles above that of Wuque's, and thus there was no need for him to utilize any techniques. A simple grab was all it took for him to capture Wuque. Afterward, he pummeled Wuque to his heart's content. Although his impression of Wuque had improved a tiny bit, it was only enough for him to spare Wuque's life. He would still beat him regardless, and there was no need for him to hold back. You've gone too far. Wuque wailed in agony. Ling Han ignored him and continued to dole out the punishment. The spear-wielding man was utterly stupefied by the scene playing out before him. In his eyes, Wuque was an invincible god of war, unrivaled among those at the same cultivation level. Yet, right now, he was being mercilessly beaten by someone who was one minor level weaker than him. Regardless of what the reason was, the truth was the truth. Young king-tier cultivators should have been invincible no matter what. Ling Han casually tossed Wuque aside after beating him for a good while. Ling Han, I'll definitely wash my humiliation away when we meet at the majestic heaven sect. Wuque shouted loudly. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, you won't stand a chance. His cultivation was flying ahead, and the distance between his and Wuque's cultivation level was only growing smaller and smaller. Moreover, the barrier between the Mountain River tier and Sun Moon tier was tremendously hard to overcome, so there was definitely a chance for him to catch up to Wuque in the short term. Wife, let's go. Ling Han held Shui Yenyu's hand and walked toward the second level of the tower. Chapter 11:18, Invincible Paragon Saint. According to that unreliable stone tablet, the next trial is a labyrinth. Moreover, we can't form teams and can only attempt it ourselves. Do you want to enter the Black Tower? Ling Han asked. Shui Yenyu pondered for a moment before shaking her head, and saying, no, I want to attempt it myself. It might be dangerous, Ling Han warned. I know, Shui Yenyu said with a nod. Then, she turned to Ling Han, and earnestly said, I don't want to become a burden to you. I want to be able to help you. Ling Han felt moved upon feeling her love for him. However, what he said next was still quite out of touch. Then let's have kids first. Damn pervert. Shui Yenyu rolled her eyes at him. Ling Han laughed cheerily, and he stopped to pull her into an embrace. Be careful. I will. Ling Han pecked her on the forehead before striding into the second level. Shui Yenyu faltered for a moment. Then, she suddenly noticed that two divine seals had appeared in her pocket. They were none other than the Vajra seal and the lion seal. Before she could even speak, Ling Han had already disappeared behind the turn in the stairs. She hurriedly ran after him, yet she saw that he had already entered the second floor. Walls that were built from stone lay before her and stretched for a long distance. They appeared especially messy and disorderly. This was already the second floor of the tower, and she had become separated from Ling Han. This wasn't the first time that they had come across such a situation. When they entered this tomb, those at the Mountain River tier, Sun Moon tier, and Heavenly Body tier had already been separated from each other. She took the two divine seals out from her pocket. Ling Han had only left these with her because he was worried about her. Moreover, he was afraid that she would reject them, and thus he immediately ran off after stuffing them into her pocket. He gave her absolutely no chance to speak. Shui Yenyu stared at the divine seals absent-mindedly. Then, she remembered that Ling Han still had the Black Tower, meaning that he would probably be safe. Only then did she regain her senses and start to analyze the stone formation before her. Ling Han was also analyzing the stone formation in the same place, though it seemed as if he were in a different dimension. There was no doubt that this was the labyrinth. Huh. It can move. After studying the formation for a while, Ling Han discovered that the stone walls would move by themselves. As a result, the layout of the paths would completely change. We have to pass this labyrinth in under 2 hours. Do we have to find the pattern that governs the movement of these stone walls? A confident smile appeared on Ling Han's face. He had ventured into numerous ancient sites during the last few years of his previous life. During that time, he had come across countless formations. Although the level of the formation before him was much higher, his cultivation level and divine sense were also much more powerful than before. The more powerful one's divine sense, the more powerful one's deduction and inference abilities would become. These were of utmost importance for alchemy, puppet creation, formation setting, and formation cracking. Ling Han's eyes moved about slightly as he stared at the formation. As time went on, the speed at which his eyes moved also increased. This was because he was following and remembering all the changes in the formation. After he remembered them, he would start to analyze the patterns that governed their movement. If he entered the Black Tower and performed comprehension under the reincarnation tree, 1 day's worth of comprehension would be equivalent to an entire year's outside. Thus, he would naturally be able to crack this formation in an extremely short amount of time. However, the time limit meant that this formation could be cracked in under 2 hours. There were rewards at stake, and he was confident that he would be able to crack this formation without any external help. His mind was already whirring, and a smile quickly tugged at the corners of his mouth. There are 36 transformations, and there are also 7 areas designed to trick people. If one enters those places, they'll definitely be trapped. I'm ready now. Ling Han walked into the stone labyrinth. He headed left for a while, and then right. He appeared especially relaxed, and he passed through the stone formation in only around an hour. Another large hall appeared before him. Xiao Sisi, Duan, and the others who had set off before him had all arrived here already. Even Wuque had already arrived. Prodigies were prodigies, after all, and they were outstanding even in the field of deduction. However, part of the reason was because the formation had been relatively simple. As such, it hadn't been able to separate the skills of the prodigies apart. If the difficulty of the formation had been increased dramatically, perhaps differences in completion time would reach several or even dozens of years. The hall before Ling Han also had a stone tablet. Ling Han nodded in greeting to Xiao Sisi and the others first, and then he walked up to the stone tablet and said, "I've passed, so where is my reward?" "Brat, remember to call me senior," the stone tablet said angrily. Ling Han took this opportunity to ask, "What should I refer to senior as?" Xiao Sisi and the others all perked their ears up. They were also keen to learn about this large tomb's origin. Being able to construct a tomb among the stars and planets was far too astonishing. Back in the day, I had galloped across the universe and been invincible for a generation. You people can refer to me as the Invincible Paragon Saint, the stone tablet said. So shameless. Everyone shook their heads in their minds. They acknowledged that this person had been supremely powerful when alive. However, it was a bit over the top for him to call himself invincible. The world was vast, and powerful beings were as many as the clouds. Who could be truly invincible? Moreover, even saints couldn't escape death. If one were invincible, could they overcome the great Tao of heaven and earth? "Oh, so it's Senior Invincible," Ling Han said. However, there wasn't a shred of respect in his voice, and this made the Invincible Paragon Saint feel extremely vexed. Bunch of brats. Back in the day, I might forget about it. A real man doesn't boast about his past achievements. The Invincible Paragon Saint humphed, and said, "Take it, it's your reward." Ling Han looked over, only to find another vial of pills on the ground. "What is it this time?" he asked. "Purple Pattern Mountain River Pill," the Invincible Paragon Saint said. "Again?" Ling Han said with a grimace. His expression was one of great displeasure. To most people, alchemical pills were incredibly rare and precious. In fact, high-level alchemical pills would even trigger fights and potentially lead to deaths. Such occurrences weren't rare. However, Ling Han was the alchemy emperor. After receiving the corresponding pill recipes, what pills couldn't he refine? Thus, he despised alchemical pill rewards the most. In addition, this was actually the purple pattern mountain river pill again. Wrong, wrong, wrong. The invincible Paragon Saint repeated the word wrong 3 times to emphasize his point. This isn't the same purple pattern mountain river pill as last time. Rather, this purple pattern mountain river pill can provide one with 1 star more power than the previous purple pattern mountain river pill. Although you emphasized your point, and although you spoke in riddles, this still doesn't change the fact that it's simply a purple pattern mountain river pill. It's merely of a slightly higher quality. Ling Han shook his head in disappointment. He was an alchemist, so he was naturally aware that lame alchemists would end up with alchemical pills of differing levels even when refining the same cauldron of pills. Some pills would reach the standard 10 stars, while other pills would only reach 8, 7, or even just 5 stars. Of course, such kinds of lame alchemists made up 99% of the alchemy world. In fact, this was nothing surprising. It was just that Ling Han's expertise in alchemy was already too high, so he couldn't help but look down on such kinds of ordinary alchemists. I'll take them back if you don't want them. The invincible Paragon Saint was even more displeased than Ling Han. Ling Han hurriedly put the pills away. These were for free anyway, so why wouldn't he take them? What's the next trial like? He asked. The invincible Paragon Saint humphed, and said, "You want me to give you special treatment with that attitude of yours? In your dreams." Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Everyone treats you with respect, and only I'm different from the ordinary. Isn't this enough reason for you to open the back door for me?" The invincible Paragon Saint was speechless for a moment. Then, he sighed. "I suddenly realized that you're more of a sh*tty brat than I initially thought." Chapter 11:19, Deciphering a Sword Strike. Ling Han's face involuntarily darkened. Why did the stone tablet suddenly curse him? Could they still communicate in a civil manner? Xiao Sisi and the others all covered their mouths and laughed. They truly admired Ling Han's courage. Although this invincible Paragon Saint had died long ago, with only a wisp of his will remaining, there were clearly countless astounding formations spread throughout this large tomb. Moreover, this will could control and manipulate these formations that were powerful enough to contain heavenly body tier elites. Thus, none of them dared to show any disrespect before the stone tablet. They were all afraid of his might. This had nothing to do with whether one was prodigious or prideful. In the cultivation world, strength was all that mattered. If one didn't possess enough strength, what right did they have to be proud? However, Ling Han was able to speak freely before this invincible Paragon Saint. This caused the others to label him as reckless in their minds, though they also couldn't help but feel admiration for his courage. Most importantly, it seemed as if Ling Han was to the invincible Paragon Saint's liking. Otherwise, the invincible Paragon Saint would have directly killed him instead of calling him a sh*tty brat. "Since you begged me, I'll be kind and tell you." A soft glow radiated from the stone tablet, and the invincible Paragon Saint said, "The third trial requires you to decipher a sword strike." Decipher a sword strike? How does that work? Ling Han asked. The invincible sword saint became a little impatient, and he said, "You still don't understand? You have to decipher a sword strike, and if you succeed, you'll pass the trial. If not, then you can *ss off. Is there a reward for passing this trial?" Ling Han continued to ask. The invincible Paragon Saint was almost rendered speechless. Can't you act more like the prodigy that you are? Why are you always thinking about rewards? A person shouldn't be too focused on material benefits. Sigh, forget about it. It's useless even if I ask. Ling Han shrugged his shoulders, and continued, it's definitely going to be purple pattern mountain river pills again. They'll only be of slightly higher quality at best and elevate one's power by 3 stars. The invincible Paragon Saint had just been about to speak, yet his words were forcefully shoved back into his mouth. That was indeed the reward for passing the 3rd trial. Fuck. Those pills can elevate your power by 3 stars. That's extremely impressive if you're battling against someone at the same cultivation level as yourself. Yet, you're still not satisfied? However, as a senior, how could he debate such matters with a junior? P*SS off. Hurry up and P*SS off. I feel angry just looking at your sh*TTY face, he said in irritation. Calm down, I still need to wait for someone. Ling Han sat cross-legged on the floor, and he also placed the Azura Demon Emperor back into the Black Tower. He was going to wait for Shui Yanyu to arrive. Although the labyrinth wasn't dangerous, Ling Han would remain worried for as long as he didn't see her arrive. *TTY brat, the invincible Paragon Saint murmured. You definitely can't be that person. Otherwise, I'll feel extremely vexed. Xiao Sisi and the others didn't wait with Ling Han. Instead, they entered the 3rd level of the tower to challenge the Deciphering Sword Strike trial. After waiting for another hour or so, Ling Han finally saw Shui Yanyu arrive. This seductive beauty's face was filled with disappointment. Although she had successfully passed the labyrinth, she had exceeded the 2-hour time limit. Although she wasn't a first-rate prodigy at the Scarlet Heaven Academy, she was at least talented enough to be called a prodigy. In this large tomb, however, she discovered that she was merely holding Ling Han back. See, hadn't Ling Han been waiting for her just then? Wife, what unnecessary thoughts are running through your mind? Ling Han embraced her lightly, and comforted, many people only experience success later in their lives. Moreover, as long your husband is powerful enough, I can find you all kinds of natural treasures. Perhaps you can eat them and instantly become a saint. Shui Yanyu rolled her eyes at him. Did he know how to comfort people? Wasn't this hurting her confidence even more? *TTY brat, your thoughts are quite fanciful, the invincible Paragon Saint suddenly said. Do you think that natural treasures that can instantly elevate one to the level of saint are as common as cabbage? Do you think you'll be able to get your hands on them? Ling Han's interest was piqued, and he asked, are there really godly treasures that can instantly transform one into a saint? He had only said that to comfort Shui Yanyu. Had he genuinely guessed right? Heaven and earth are so vast. What kinds of treasures don't exist? The invincible Paragon Saint sighed in emotion, and said, Heaven and earth have birthed things so poisonous that even saints will drop dead upon coming into contact with them. On the flip side, heaven and earth have also birthed things so wonderful that even mortals can shoot to the sky in a single step. Judging by what you've said, talent and whatnot are of no importance compared to pure luck, Ling Han concluded. You're not entirely wrong, the invincible Paragon Saint said. However, such fortunate people only appear once every several trillion years. Moreover, even if one obtains a supreme medicine that allows them to instantly become a saint, the cultivation that they receive isn't a result of their own comprehension. They'll need billions upon trillions of years to understand and achieve mastery of these comprehensions. If they're less talented, perhaps they'll never be able to improve another inch for the rest of their lives. Ling Han smiled, and said, I'm confident that I can become that fortunate person. In fact, one supreme medicine mightn't be enough. Although the heavenly phoenix Divine Maiden and Hellion Sun Shui were both relatively talented, there was only a sliver of hope that they could become saints. Moreover, he still had his parents as well as Lu Yutong and his other lovers. He couldn't just sit on his hands and watch them age and die, right? So be it if there was nothing that he could do. However, since there was a ray of hope, he had to fight to grab onto it no matter what. He had to obtain these supreme medicines to raise the strength of those around him. In fact, it was the Rain Emperor, Ding Ping, and the others who were incredibly talented cultivators. Moreover, they were resolute and determined in addition to being talented, and as long as they didn't die, it was extremely likely that they would become saints one day. The invincible Paragon Saint almost spat blood. Such kinds of supreme medicines only appear once every several trillion years. Obtaining one will cost one several lifetimes of fortune, yet you actually want a few? I'll give you my admiration if you're genuinely able to obtain a supreme medicine. If you can obtain two, I'll change my surname to yours. No need to follow my surname. I already have a son. Ling Han chuckled as he rejected his offer. The invincible Paragon Saint was rendered speechless. This person was truly shameless. P*SS off, P*SS off. Otherwise, I won't be able to resist the urge to kick you in the face, he said impatiently. Hold up for a moment. What's the next trial like? Can we two complete it together? Yes, it's only deciphering a sword strike anyway. You'll receive a reward as long as you can decipher it within a set time. The invincible sword saint appeared especially irritated, and he continued, I know that you care about rewards the most. So, there's no need to ask any more. There was a look of disdain on Ling Han's face, and he said, it's going to be another purple pattern mountain river pill anyway. It'll probably elevate one's power by 3 stars at most. SSH*TTY brat. The invincible Paragon Saint was so ticked off that his face was almost twisted out of shape. Ling Han chuckled, and said, I really do wish that Senior can reward me with something else. The invincible Paragon Saint gritted his teeth if he still had teeth and spat, fuck off. How boring. I haven't even passed the 3rd trial yet I already know that the reward is merely another purple pattern mountain river pill. Sigh. Ling Han grumbled in his mind as he held hands with Shui Yenyu and climbed the stairs to the 3rd level. There were numerous people standing here. There were those at the mountain river tier, those at the sun-moon tier, and even those at the heavenly body tier. Ling Han was slightly astonished by this sight. Shouldn't the first trial have eliminated most of the people? How were there still so many people here? Up ahead, a person that was formed from light was currently performing the same sword strike over and over again. However, this sword strike appeared to adhere to some true meaning of the Great Tao. Each strike was tremendously mighty and seemed able to suppress heaven and earth. We have to decipher this sword strike? Ling Han watched the sword strike carefully. This strike wasn't especially complex, and its might came from its resonance with the Great Tao. It drew on the regulations of heaven and earth, appearing extremely mysterious every time it was performed. We're timed starting from when we enter, right? It's just that we're all timed differently depending on when we entered. This realization made Ling Han feel even more strange. Is this really a tomb? You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.